Chapter 46. The wind blew across the wasteland. Yellow soil filled one's eyes. Endless desolation. Endless bitterness. As pioneers, the people of Moon Creek Town had to face all sorts of troubles. It was as if trouble had become a part of their lives. Another mine collapse? Another monster in the wilderness? Mountain dog? Corpse shredder bird? Gnoll? Blood-toothed boar? All sorts of monsters became the topic of conversation in the only bar in Moon Creek Town. Under the bright candlelight, the air in the bar was filled with the sour smell of men working all day, the strong smell of alcohol, and the sound of heated discussions. However, there was a new topic of conversation in the bar recently. It was a young wizard called Duke Marcus. I heard that a wizard with the surname Marcus killed Hog? A farmer suddenly asked his companion. That powerful 2-meter-tall gnoll Hog? No. It should be 4 meters tall. A few days ago, when I passed by Sentinel Ridge, I saw Hog's headless corpse. It was terrifying. Even though the corpse was already rotten, it was still at least 1.5 stories tall. A peddler who had obviously just returned said, "What about the head?" The farmer asked. I heard that the head and claws were sent to Stormwind City and Goldflash Town in the Elven Forest for public display. Amazing! Quang Gong sighed. Of course. Lord Duke Marcus is the second genius in Stormwind's history to become an official wizard with a 9th-grade talent. The middle-aged mercenary interrupted, pride written all over his face. Moon Creek Town was not big. There were only 1,000 people in the town. Even if he did not know their names, he could still recognize them. Do you know that Lord Marcus? Of course. I'm his subordinate. The mercenary said without hiding anything. Come on. The followers of the wizard are all very strong. Even stronger than our town's #1 knight, Rillick. Quang Gong ridiculed the mercenary. But in the next moment, Quang Gong was speechless. It should be said that everyone in the bar was speechless. Yo Makarov, you're here. An ordinary greeting with a dazzling entrance. His blue and white mage robe and dazzling mage emblem proved his identity, but the 5 sharp icicles hovering above his shoulders deepened everyone's impression of him. It was illogical for the icicles to float in the air, but if it was on the body of a powerful mage, then it would become reasonable no matter how illogical it was. Sir Marcus, you are... Oh, this is just a part of my self-cultivation, Duque replied casually. Makarov did not pursue the matter any further. He did not understand the world of the mages even if he listened. However, this did not stop him and the people around him from feeling that even though they did not understand it, they still felt that it was amazing. Makarov stared blankly at the bag in Duque's hand. Let's talk upstairs. Makarov had already arrived, along with a few of his men. Makarov led Duque to his room, and a few of his men guarded the door. Below, the rest of the people in Moon Creek Town were in an uproar. Wow, that's Duke Marcus? So young. What a promising young man. Why did he come to Moon Creek Town? There's nothing good in the western wilderness that could attract such a big shot like him, right? Could it be that he found a new mineral or specialty? How is that possible? What else is there in the western wilderness apart from various crops and a few ordinary iron and copper mines? None of them expected that Duque had really developed a new specialty for the western wilderness. Inside the room, Makarov and the other mercenaries were dazzled by the treasures on the table. Pearls. Pearls of all sizes. From the smallest pearls that did not have much luster, to the small lustrous pearls, to the more precious black pearls, and finally to the most dazzling golden pearls, which were the size of an infant's fist. So many pearls almost made Makarov's heart stop beating. Of course, apart from the pearls, there were also all kinds of beautiful corals, transparent yellow tortoise shells, but the most dazzling were the pearls. This is the specialty of the western wilderness that I developed. I intend to establish a shipping route and name it the Pearl Route. Hiss! The mercenaries simultaneously gasped. A shipping route. It was not something that could be done in one go. A shipping route meant that Duque's pearls would have a stable source of income. Makarov, who was the most knowledgeable among them, could not help but feel suspicious. Please forgive my presumptuousness, but the entire coast of the western wilderness is filled with murlocs that can never be completely killed, sir. How did you? Oh. Well, it was a coincidence that I controlled a murloc tribe. The murlocs were the ones who collected the pearls for me. Ah. Makarov could not help but cry out in shock. Legend had it that mages would rear strange familiars as their servants, but the Murlocs. Moreover, the Murlocs were crude, cruel, and had low intelligence. This was inconceivable. However, from the moment they met, Makarov realized that the youth in front of him was a person who could turn the impossible into the possible. From the initial shock, he had become a little numb, even blindly believing. "Sir, is there anything I can do for you? I've already paid for a batch of ships from Old Jackson at the Stormwind shipyard. They should be ready by now. Bring me as many as we have. The sailors can be found at the head of the horses. The first batch of boatmen will be paid double, to be paid in full before the ship sets sail. Also, be sure to plant my flag on the bow of every ship." Looking at the few flags that Xueqi took out, Makarov was a little suspicious, but he did not ask. Instead he asked, "What about you, sir?" "I can't leave for now. As for the money, you can sell the pearls here first." No. "Sir, you still have a lot of money left from killing Hog. It's enough to hire sailors. I don't know the price of pearls, so it's better for you to handle it yourself." Xueqi rubbed his eyebrows. Indeed, there were too few people who could work for him. This was an era where illiterate people walked everywhere. It was easy to find a muscular man, but difficult to find someone with brains. Most civilians would not deal with merchants unless they had no other choice. However, Xueqi could not leave. As long as the threat from the Naga tribe was not resolved, there would be no peace here. "Then let's do it. But bring some back as proof that I opened up the Pearl route. Also, help me find Mage Norton from the Royal Magic Academy, and ask him to help me apply for the exclusive rights of this route." "Exclusive rights? That seems... You think the nobles will interfere?" "Sir is wise." Makarov was a yes man. "Don't worry, let them come." Xueqi's black eyes flashed with a cruel light. Chapter 47. After Xueqi became famous for killing Hog, Xueqi once again became famous in Stormwind City for another matter: the Pearl Sea route. The influence and coverage of these two matters were completely different. No matter how powerful Hog was, he was still a monster in the Elven Forest. To the upper echelons of Stormwind, Hog was just a small local problem. The appearance of the Pearl Sea route not only shocked the entire circle of nobles in Stormwind City, but even King Lang was alarmed. In the heart of the Stormwind Kingdom, in the Stormwind stronghold of the Stormwind City, the magnificent white marble floor reflected the morning sun. In the octagonal reception hall of the royal family, the guards of the royal family stood upright with sharp halberds in their hands. Their helmets were bright, and their eyes were sharp. Their expressions were firm, and their vigilant gazes proved that they could deal with any danger. They were the elites that Anduin Lothar had trained and trained. Ever since the royal knights were handed over to Lothar, Lothar's performance had never disappointed King Lang. It had been 20 years since he ascended to the throne at the age of 20. With a head of black and brown curly hair, a chiseled manly face, and a pair of friendly yet dignified eyes, Lang looked extremely heroic in his prime. Sitting on a gold-rimmed throne on a white base, with a gold-rimmed blue lion flag printed with the emblem of the Storm Kingdom behind him, Ryan was reading a report. "The Pearl Sea route in the Western Wilderness? Earth Mage Duke Marcus wants to obtain exclusive rights to this route that he opened up? Valid for 10 years. Anduin, I seem to have heard of this name somewhere?" King Lang tilted his head and looked at his good friend, who was also his most loyal and reliable subject. Lothar had a handsome face, and his eyes were always exuding determination. Every curve of his face was so perfect, and it was a perfect representation of the word masculine. His long black curly hair would look messy on anyone else, but on Lothar, it was a special kind of masculine charm. They were both handsome men, but the biggest difference between Anduin and Lang was probably their skin color. Anduin, who trained outdoors all year round, had a darker complexion and was healthier. On the other hand, Lang's complexion was pale due to the lack of sunlight. As a childhood friend of King Lang, Lothar was also in the prime of a man's life. Full of energy and experience, he was at the age to do great things. Anduin Lothar took the report and quickly scanned through it. He nodded and said, "It is indeed him. I have just submitted a report to your majesty. Duke Marcus was the second 9th grade magic apprentice in the history of our country, and he became an Earth Magus on the day he entered the academy. He is a once-in-a-century genius of our country. He also belongs to the Wang clan's mage squad." Clayan smiled. His smile had the warmth of spring. If this Pearl Sea route is real, then the Pearl Sea route won't be a problem. Then our country's future finances will be much better. There are monsters running amok in the Elven Forest, and a lot of the taxes that should be paid cannot be collected. You have been urging me to renovate the walls of Stormwind City, and it seems that the money has been settled. But I have a question. Your Majesty, please ask. Lothar bowed gracefully. My internal affairs advisor always tells me that unless I spend half of the annual income of the treasury to support a fleet that is no less than a third of the fleet of the powerful maritime power Katiras, I should not even think about the sea. Why can this Marcus guarantee the safety of a route? The application did not explain. But I will investigate thoroughly. Lang's finger gently flicked the report. I admire this young man who is determined to open up. If he can bring in a stable annual tax revenue for the kingdom, I can only charge him 10% of the tax. Well, Lothar, help me warn those ignorant fellows. I do not want to destroy the seedlings of the kingdom. Understood, Your Majesty. Lothar retreated with one hand on his shoulder. Xueqi did not know that he had already received the joint attention of King Lang and Anduin. He was now on a deserted island on the coast of the western wilderness, quietly listening to Vara's report. The female Naga Siren chief seemed to have adapted to her new role. Her submissive attitude made Xueqi feel very comfortable. Master, we have collected more than 3,300 pearls of various kinds, among which the most valuable are 31 golden pearls and 125 black pearls. May I ask, do you want to ship them all at once? Xueqi waved his hand. There is no need for that. Leave a 10th here. I want to do hunger marketing. What hunger marketing? Xueqi was speechless. Forget it. This is something you will not understand even if I tell you. However, you have to remember, do not conquer the 3 merfolk tribes closest to Stormwind City. Only send people to escort the ships with my magic imprint. The trading point will be set here in the future. When humans land on the island, leave a male Naga Siren behind as a handover. Understood, my master. You may leave first. Yes. In the distance, 3 small cargo ships entered Xueqi's field of vision. Apart from Makarov, there was also an unexpected figure that entered Xueqi's field of vision. As the ship got closer, Xueqi knew that what he saw was not an illusion. There was a dignified lady with her blonde hair tied up at the back of her head. She wore an aqua-blue dress, and compared to Makarov and the other young sailors in dirty shirts and shorts, she was of a completely different world. The 30-ton boat did not need a special dock, and it was not too much of a problem to dock on the beach. Taking advantage of the ebb tide, the newly hired captain rushed the boat onto the beach. That way, after the cargo was loaded, it would be easy to get the boat into the sea when the tide rose. Almost as soon as the boat stopped, the lady jumped down excitedly. The middle-aged lady could not be considered a beauty. Under her relatively flat forehead was a pair of slender eyes, and the tips of her eyebrows were slightly raised. Her eyes were clear but not lacking in shrewdness, and her small nose was sharp and straight. One look and anyone could tell that she was an extremely independent person. However, she had a unique temperament. She had the keen sense of a merchant, and the dignified air of a lady made one feel very comfortable. She quickly walked in front of Xueqi and obediently gave Xueqi a ladylike bow. Hello, you must be Sir Duke Marcus? I am Xueqi. May I ask who you are, madam? I am Jones, Elizabeth Jones, the only jewel processing supplier in Stormwind City. I heard that you have a large number of pearls, and I think that we should be able to reach a pleasant cooperation. Elizabeth Jones. This was a name that Xueqi did not know. However, Duke knew that there was a certain Isabel Jones who would become the jewelry processing supplier of New Stormwind City at some point in time. Chapter 48. Xueqi was not flattered by the other party's recommendation. If Xueqi was said to be a rising star with a promising future when he first became an earth mage. But now, Xueqi already had signs of moving from a comet that flashed across the sky to a star. Not having enough money to support Xueqi's studies in magic was the biggest shackle that restricted Xueqi's growth. But what if this shackle was removed? Xueqi could become an immeasurable new force in Stormwind City. His noble identity as a mage allowed him to transcend the aristocratic forces, and his identity as a mage meant that he could not spend too much time on business activities. Therefore, Elizabeth Jones's visit had a deeper meaning other than to discuss cooperation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come to this barren little island in person. Hello, Jones. Duke was gentle and polite. He didn't show too much enthusiasm, but he didn't keep people at arm's length. Elizabeth Jones was an elegant lady in her 30s. When she heard about Duque's age, she thought that Duque would be easier to talk to, but she realized that she was wrong the moment the conversation began. Duque was clearly not the kind of inexperienced brat who would lose his bearings after a few compliments. Therefore, Elizabeth decided to treat Duque as an equal and a business partner. She asked Duque in a very ladylike tone, "May I know the quality, quantity, and method of obtaining your pearls, sir?" Duque snapped his fingers. Then, there was the sound of splashing water. The sudden appearance of the murlocs startled Jones and Duque's newly hired sailors. The sailors were almost ready to fight. Because it was murlocs. Colorful fish-like bodies accompanied by strong limbs, the two murlocs grandly raised a huge shell and walked in front of Duque and Jones under everyone's gaze. They put down the shell and knelt before Duque. Duke's mouth emitted a strange, "oh-la-ha-ha" sound, and then the two fishmen happily ran back into the sea with strange steps. Two palms glowing with arcane magic appeared, scaring the hearts of Jones and the sailors again. Duque chuckled and opened the shell with hand of magic. Under the morning light, the dazzling array of pearls in the large shell that could fit a 5-year-old child almost dazzled Elizabeth Jones' eyes. In her eyes, it was as if countless beautiful and dazzling new pearl jewelry had appeared. Only the sailors secretly exclaimed in low voices, "My God! Our employer, Sir Marcus, has actually subdued the fishmen? Those barbaric, evil murlocs that hunt humans nearby?" Duque raised his hand, and the whispers of the sailors immediately stopped. "Madam Jones, the situation is as you can see. Because I've studied the merfolk language, I've used a certain method to control 3 merfolk tribes on the north coast of the western wilderness. They will collect a steady stream of pearls, corals, hawksbill shells, and a series of valuable marine specialties for me." Duque turned his head and smiled at the sailors. "Similarly, a ship with my wizard imprint hanging on the bow is absolutely safe in the sea between Stormwind City's harbor and here. Not only will the merfolk not attack you, but they will also protect you from the attacks of other marine life. Of course, going to sea is risky. The merfolk cannot resist powerful marine life that surpasses their combat strength." For a moment, whether it was Jones or the sailors, their hearts warmed up. As if reluctant to part with them, Jones picked up one pearl after another, examined them over and over, and then smiled. "Then, Sir Marcus, shall we go back to Stormwind City and discuss in detail?" "Very well." Leaving Stormwind City by land, going south to Goldshire Town, then west through West Spring Stronghold into the western wilderness, and finally to the northern beach, it would take a full week. It was extremely simple to go by sea. Starting from Stormwind City's harbor and following the southwest coastline, it would only take 1 day. Waiting was boring. In fact, in the ship's narrow cabin, Duque had basically reached a cooperation agreement with Elizabeth. This was a 10-year contract. From now on, Duque had to guarantee a supply of no less than 1,000 pearls to Elizabeth Jones' jewelry store every year. As the raw material supplier, Duque could receive 40% of the final sale price of the pearl jewelry. The price was mutually agreed upon by both parties when Duque delivered the goods. When delivering the goods, Duque delivered the goods and received the money at the same time. After Duque delivered the first batch of pearls, Elizabeth needed to pay an additional 10,000 gold coins to Duque as a signing bonus for obtaining the exclusive right to sell Duque's pearl route. In the cabin, Elizabeth's attendant handed over the wine symbolizing the happy cooperation. Duque and Elizabeth lightly clinked their glasses to show the happy cooperation. "Seriously, Sir Marcus, I have to remind you that I will earn more than you can imagine with this kind of cooperation. If you are willing to accept after-sales settlement, quarterly settlement, you can at least double your current wealth." Duque gently swirled the liquor in the goblet, letting the aroma of the alcohol escape, and sniffed it lightly. For businessmen, it is instinct to pursue greater profits. But I am a mage first, and then the master of the pearl route. I understand what you mean. It is because we value different things that we have such a pleasant cooperation. Indeed. Duque's smile was a bit thought-provoking. And you bought my pearls with a buyout, which also took a considerable risk. It is not unacceptable for me to sell them at a lower price. Although a little sorry, I still want to say that Sir Marcus, you have a maturity that does not match your age. Nonsense. This young master is a university animal. Although he was complaining in his heart, Duque felt a little guilty. He did not know how long Jones could earn from this pearl business. He only knew that if the orcs came and Stormwind City fell, it was estimated that Jones would lose a lot. Unfortunately, for the future of Stormwind City, amen. Good luck. With the help of Elizabeth Jones, Duque's pearls became the new favorite of Stormwind City socialites in a very short time. Almost all the upper-class aristocrats in Stormwind City knew that Duke Marcus had a hen that laid golden eggs. Yet, no one could intervene. It was not that no aristocrats had the idea of the pearl route. The fishing boats they secretly sent were attacked by the merfolk without exception, suffering heavy casualties. And Duque said that the merfolk were not under his control and had nothing to do with him. In this way, Duque set foot on the steps of the library of the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy with a huge wealth that made others envious. Facing the librarian, who told him that copying every spell here cost money, Duque only said one sentence, "Please pack it up. I want all the spells of the Earth Mage rank." Chapter 49. He had seen a tycoon before. He had never seen such a tycoon. Not only was he rich, but he was also a little stupid. The manager was an old man who looked like he was about to die. Although his face was full of wrinkles and he looked like a Shar-Pei, Duque could clearly feel the abundant arcane energy in the old man's body. The system elf had determined that the old man's power level was also Crimson Skeleton. In other words, this old man who looked like he would choke to death when he swallowed his saliva was actually a boss-level existence whose power was far above Duque's? Duque was embarrassed. Should he say that Stormwind City was the second most powerful human magic holy land after the Dalajan? Young man, I know you are talented, but no matter how talented you are, you can't master the entire ocean of magic. The magic here can be divided into 9 major schools: defense, conjuring, divination, enchantment, and evocation. Take the evocation school that you are most familiar with. Evocation is the shaping of energy. It is also divided into fire, ice, arcane, and other minor schools. I know that. You know that there are so many schools, but you still want to learn all of them? Do you know that even if you can learn all the level 2 spells that an earth mage can learn, learning so many spells will at least make your beard grow an inch longer? It's not that exaggerated. Duque looked like he didn't care about level 2 spells at all. He kept saying that magic was actually easy to learn, and even bragged that he was a 9th grade talent genius. In fact, it was to hide the fact that he had the system to learn magic in an instant. As he spoke, to prove that he was not lying, Duque even drew a level 2 spell Ice Armor, and demonstrated it to the old man. Instantly connecting to the ice elemental realm, a large amount of cold air gathered from the void and condensed on Duque's body. Cold white light gushed out of his arms and quickly covered Duque's arms at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not only his arms, but his legs and body also flashed with a cold white light. The white light flowed and covered Duque's body and limbs. It was almost impossible for an ordinary mage to learn a spell formula the moment they came into contact with it. Even if a Breaking Dawn mage were to come into contact with a rank 2 spell that they had never seen before and learn it on the spot, not everyone could do it. It would already be impressive if the other ice armors had the appearance of armor that could protect the mage's vitals. What about Duque? A mere ice armor spell was actually made into something fancy by him. The Monarch Plate Armor Set. Oh, it was the Storm City Guard full-body armor set, impressively appeared in front of the old man. Layers of orderly pauldrons, bright breastplates, solid waist armor. It was already very good to be able to create these with the ice armor spell. Do you know what Duque created? He had even created a chain armor that was made of small iron rings that interlocked with each other to protect his upper arms. As for the majestic and mighty lion head carvings on his belt and gauntlets, he naturally didn't pull them down. Apart from the lack of color and the fact that it was made of ice, it was the standard equipment of Storm City soldiers. With one look, the old man no longer had any doubts about Duque's talent and abilities. He was only filled with shock and resentment. Was magic that easy to cultivate? If it was that easy, the Stormwind City Royal Magic Academy wouldn't need to send out a large number of people every year to select apprentices from all over the country. Tens of thousands of youths participated in the test every year, but only a few dozen people were able to be tested for magic aptitude. Most of these people didn't have enough aptitude. Even if they couldn't be nurtured into official mages, it would be good to find some apprentices to help them. That was why they were reluctantly recruited into the Magic Academy. With time, they could become official Earth mages before the age of 40, and then join the mage team as a fighting force. Hence, in the Magic Academy, apprentices in their 40s and 50s were not rare. Thus, Xueqi's age was considered very young even among apprentices, let alone official mages. When Xueqi gave up on becoming Mediva's disciple, the old man was still resentful. A good seedling had been destroyed just like that. But how long had it been? A month. In just a month, Xueqi's strength had risen from a level 1 earth mage to a level 5 mage. If it were any other mage, such rapid progress would have caused problems with their magic circuits being disrupted, or damage due to overexertion. But what about Xueqi? He could clearly feel the elemental power flowing slowly and orderly in Xueqi's body. The extremely gentle elements hid an unimaginable violence. As long as Xueqi wanted to, these elements could turn into the fiercest flames or frost at any time and attack Xueqi's enemies. It had only been a month. Was a month a lot of time? Even if Xueqi had been accepted as a core disciple by Mediv from the start, he wouldn't have been able to make such terrifying and solid progress in a month. Even the guardian Mediv, who was known as the most talented, had only improved at such a rate. When Mediv was young, he had been carefully guided by the strongest mage in Azeroth at the time, his mother, Aegwynn. And the old man himself had trained from a level 1 Earthmaster to a level 5 mage, which took him a year and a half. And this was in Stormwind, the second most powerful mage nation in the human world, second only to the Dalajan. For those roaming mages in small places who couldn't receive orthodox magic education, if they relied on their own research and training, it would be a matter worth celebrating if anyone could make such progress in 5 years. Faced with Xueqi, the old man was completely speechless. To make such rapid progress in a month and have such a solid foundation, this was not only a shock to him. More importantly, it was a blow to him. Comparisons were odious. Was a level 9 talent really so frightening and amazing? The old man's heart was hit hard. Taking another glance at Duke, who looked as though it was a matter of course and did not look happy at all, the old man thought to himself, even if this kid were to be placed among the high elves, he would still be a monster-level fellow. Xueqi didn't have time to care about the old man's thoughts. He was stunned by the spell list of the Royal Magic Academy. He really couldn't figure out if the original game had deliberately reduced the number of spells for mages to become a pure attack and crowd control mage class, or if Azeroth had so many spells to begin with. Spell type, Grease, Fog Concealment. Prophecy type, Identify. Enchantment type, Hypnosis. When the old man brought over a large pile of spellbooks, which was as tall as a small mountain, and showed a teasing expression, Xueqi really felt his scalp tingle. But since he had made such a big statement, he had to learn it. He had to pretend to be cool to the end even if he had to hold back his tears. Chapter 50. Xueqi had indeed learned such a large number of spells on the spot. Logically speaking, there was no need for him to take these spell manuals back. However, seeing the old librarians, if you don't respect magic, I'll make things difficult for you next time. Look, Xueqi retreated in defeat. Moreover, Xueqi discovered something that was rather serious for him, and that was the limits of the system elf. As it turned out, the system elf was a thing of the scientific side. For magic that could be explained by science, the system elf was at the level of a god. For example, ice and fire magic, the system elf could not only help Xueqi learn spells in an instant, but it could also immediately derive a large number of metamagic abilities, increasing the power of magic in all aspects. Some categories that did not feel scientific, or were in a direction that Xueqi was unfamiliar with, such as the enchantment spell Hypnosis, was deemed unable to identify by the system. As for the divination spell, which allowed the user to understand what the other party was saying, but could not read or write, language proficiency, the system's feedback was not in line with the principles of translation, unable to identify. The most special spell, necromancy, was directly told by the system that it could not be used due to the lack of unknown conditions. Xueqi could only carry a large pile of spell manuals back to the dormitory that the academy had arranged for him, and slowly study them by himself. Basically, he had memorized all the spells. It was not that he could not use them, but it lacked the amazing feeling of mastering them on the first try. Xueqi knew that he was being too demanding. The old librarian had clearly told him that all kinds of magic casting techniques and metamagic abilities would be passed on to their disciples by mentors, and they would not be able to learn the essence of it outside. At most, they would learn some basic techniques in public lessons given by mentors to the entire academy. If he wanted to learn, that was fine, but it was an equivalent exchange. The problem was that Xueqi had previously rejected Mediv. Other than Old Man Norton, No mentor would be willing to exchange magic techniques with him. The most important thing was that Xueqi suddenly realized that the overall standard of magic in the academy was not high. Other than Medivh, there were only 2 Morning Star wizards in the entire academy, and there were no magic books above level 5 in the academy's library. If he wanted to learn more advanced magic, he would either go to the Dalajan, or go to Karazhan. Yes, Medivh's old nest, Karazhan, which was currently under the control of the Burning Legion's boss, Sargeras. As a guardian, as well as the son and successor of the previous guardian, Aegwin, Medivh had a private mage tower in Karazhan. The southern part of the Elven Forest was the Twilight Forest, and the southeastern part of the Twilight Forest was the Headwind Path. Karazhan was located in the Headwind Path. That place was equivalent to Medivh's fief, and outsiders were forbidden from entering. If Xueqi had been willing to be Medivh's disciple, he would have been able to enter. But at the same time, it was very likely that he would have been swallowed whole. This is the upper limit of the Storm Royal Magic Academy. How do I break through this limit? Just as Xueqi was feeling a little melancholy, there was a knock on the dormitory door. Who? Xueqi, it's me. Darnielle and Aitana are here too. Come in. Xueqi, who was buried in the pile of books, stretched out his right hand. The arcane power in the magic circuit flowed gently, and he cast a small magic trick. Transmutation, switch. The lock of the door, which was 10 meters away, was opened by Xueqi. Click. The door opened. Darnielle and Aitana were a little surprised that Xueqi, who was supposed to open the door, was sitting so far away. Darnielle stretched his thick neck, as if he wanted to see if there was anyone else behind the door, or if Xueqi had hired a servant. Darnielle, it's just a switch, Aitana reminded him in a small voice. Darnielle smiled and scratched his head, then strode in. Because Darnielle's body was too big, taking up 2/3 of the aisle, Aitana could only follow behind like a follower. Looking up from the pile of books, Xueqi found that Darnielle looked relieved. What's wrong? Nothing, I just realized that you have a human side, Xueqi. I thought you didn't need to learn anything and could directly advance to the level of Guardian Medivh. Pfft. It was Aitana who laughed. Xueqi could only helplessly open his hands. Okay, you've come to me. Is it about Mentor Norton? Both of them nodded at the same time. My mentor just finished his research and informed us that you were back. He asked us to tell you that the notes were translated. Thank you. Xueqi smiled. He turned to look at their robes and smiled even more brilliantly. Darnielle had the symbol of 2 small books on his chest, and Aitana had 3. This was the symbol of a junior apprentice and an intermediate apprentice in the Royal Magic Academy. The level of an apprentice only reflected their aptitude. Only the number of book symbols reflected the status of an apprentice. Of course, there were those who were stuck at the higher level for a long time. Facing Xueqi's gaze, Aitana was embarrassed. We can't compare to you. No. Since we came out from the Northshire Abbey together, we should take care of each other. I'll go to Mentor Norton first. We'll have a good chat later. It wasn't just the straightforward Darnielle. Even Aitana could not hide the joy on her face. It couldn't be helped. Xueqi had been in the limelight recently. First, he killed Hog, and then opened up the Pearl Sea route all by himself. Even their mentors hinted to them to interact more with Xueqi. Just like that, they followed Xueqi to Wizard Norton's private laboratory in the north of the academy. Only Morning Star wizards and above were allowed to build their own wizard tower within the boundaries of the academy. As a sky wizard, Old Man Norton only had a standalone house with its own courtyard as a laboratory. As if sensing Xueqi's arrival, the door to the courtyard automatically opened to the left and right. The stairs that should have led to the main entrance of the hall on the first floor suddenly bulged upwards, turning into a staircase that led to the 3rd floor. Just as Xueqi stood on the first step, he suddenly heard a voice. Stand still. In the next second, the entire staircase was like an escalator, sending Xueqi up to the 3rd floor. At the end of the staircase was a circular window. Just as Xueqi was about to reach the 3rd floor, it suddenly opened in a spiral shape. Through the bright light, Xueqi saw Old Norton sitting on a recliner, using a magnifying glass to look at his notes. You're here. I'm here. I heard you had a good harvest in the Western Wilderness. Mentor Norton, do you need funds for your research? I can. Old Norton waved his hand. I'm old and have lost my motivation. I don't need those things. At this moment, Xueqi felt a never-before-felt lethargy from the old man. What had happened to the old man? Old Wizard Norton raised his head and looked at Xueqi. He suddenly laughed. It's nothing. I just saw my limits and the possibilities you have. Even if I'm not qualified to be your mentor, I still hope that you can accept my inheritance. Chapter 51. Xueqi was stunned. The breath that he exhaled from his nose and mouth was full of surprise. The old man looked at Xueqi, his seemingly old and muddy eyes gleaming with wisdom. The furnishings in the room were very simple. Soft beige walls, 2 comfortable armchairs, and a low coffee table. That was everything. It was so simple that it was impossible to find anything else to distract his attention from the other party. After a short moment of surprise, Xueqi looked at the old mage who gave him a chance and a new start in the world of Azeroth. It was a very complicated look. There was the disappointment of giving up, but there was also the hope of placing his hopes on someone else. In the old man's face, Xueqi seemed to see the last wish of an old man who was obsessed with magic and struggled for his whole life but did not achieve much. Xueqi could not bear to reject the hope of this old man who was at the end of his life and finally nodded. If you agree, I'll call you teacher from now on. Old man Norton felt like he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled as if his ears were not working well and he was hearing things. His eyes widened in disbelief. What? The arrogant kid who looked down on the world's most powerful mage, Medivh, actually called me teacher? Happiness came so suddenly that the old man could not believe it. Xueqi, I really wanted to be your teacher. But Medivh, I actually... The old man was a little incoherent. Xueqi stepped forward and grabbed old man Norton's hand. Don't underestimate yourself. If it wasn't for your suggestion at Northshire Abbey, I might have been beaten to death by that fellow Brando. As for my refusal to be Medivh's disciple, it's not just because of ambition. There's a deeper reason. You'll understand my difficulties in the future. The old man's mouth trembled and his eyes became moist. In the end, the old man did not cry. Instead, he let out a long sigh. Please forgive this old man who knows a little magic but has no courage. I'm really ashamed to be your teacher. If I want to be your teacher, I should use my body to be your safe haven. At that moment, I didn't stand up. I knew that I would never have the chance to be your teacher. However, I will be honored to be your guide into the Hall of Magic. Seeing that the old man had made up his mind, Xueqi could only nod. A teacher and a guide were 2 completely different concepts. But that was all they could do. Old Norton immediately put on a stern face. He took out the High Elf Mage Apprentice Handbook, with one hand and a translation that he had written himself. I've carefully studied this beginner's handbook for a long time, and I found that for the past 1,000 years, mankind's research in the field of magic has actually taken a detour. Detour? Yes. Traditional magic training was nothing more than teaching talented kids a lot of magic knowledge and letting them communicate with the magic energy in the elemental realm or other alien worlds. Then they would guide the magic energy into their own bodies through meditation to transform themselves and form magic circuits. After that, they would train day after day, making the magic circuits thick and strong. At this point, the old man pointed at the elven language on the handbook and suddenly spat. This is indeed the safest way to train. 1,000 years ago, when humans had no contact with magic, this method was indeed the safest and most secure way to train. But the cunning elves left something up their sleeves. Left something up their sleeves? Xueqi pricked up his ears. Yes. Left something up their sleeves. Do you know why high elves are naturally better at magic than humans? Xueqi frowned. Race's innate talent. Of course this is one of the reasons, but there's another reason. The Sunwell. Xueqi immediately realized something. You mean? Yes. Actually, for a good seedling with a strong physique, the foundation of magic can be built up quickly. No, even an acolyte with an average physique can easily rise to the level of a morning star wizard. The prerequisite is that they need a source of highly concentrated magic to transform their bodies day and night, and it has to be the body of a child whose body is still in its puberty. Xueqi felt a headache coming on. Where was he going to find a sun well? That thing was tightly guarded by the high elves, and they would fight anyone who tried to touch it. He did not think that he had the ability to deal with the Sun King in Cuel Salis. At this moment, old man Norton patted Xueqi's shoulder. I'm willing to bet that even the person who gave you this apprentice's handbook Did not realize that he had given you such a shocking treasure trove. Xueqi added in his heart, it's she, not he. The first 49 pages are essentially no different from the human wizard apprentice training manuals. At most, they're more refined. But the last page. The old man flipped to the last page of the handbook. Xueqi did not know Elven, but this did not stop him from noticing that the Elven words had suddenly become sloppy. It was completely different from the fair and elegant handwriting at the front, and seemed to be very casual. The old man also flipped open Xueqi's translation book. Xueqi realized that the last page had not been translated. Do you know why I didn't translate it? Xueqi shook his head. Because the Elven language on this page is nonsensical. The old man narrowed his eyes and smiled. It's just like how you created a pearl course out of thin air. I was also suddenly enlightened. This is not a language at all, but a special magic circuit layout. The old man suddenly became excited. Haha. It just so happened that I, an arcana expert, discovered the secret on it. This is a special magic circuit design that can absorb the surrounding arcana energy into the body like a vortex. Xueqi was surprised. And this is a completely different magic circuit cultivation method that is commonly used by the elves. It has a more extensive magic circuit expansion method for the absorption of arcana energy. I don't know why the Sun King hinted to Prince Kale that's to cultivate like this, but this is undoubtedly a help to you. If you cultivate according to this, you can quickly increase and strengthen your magic circuit even without the sun well. As soon as Old Man Norton said this, Xueqi immediately understood why. According to the history of the game, in the near future, Quel Salus would fall, and all the remaining High Elves would fall into a strong addiction to arcana energy. As the king of the High Elves, Sun King Anastrian certainly knew how bad the addiction of the Sunwell was for the elves. So he sent Kale, that's to the Dalajan to study, which was also a disguised way to give Kale, that's more hope and a broader future. However, the Sun King did not expect that his little selfishness, which he thought could not be discovered, would flow into the hands of Aurelia, and then to Xueqi. Xueqi suddenly sighed. Aurelia was really his benefactor. Chapter 52. Old Man Norton handed over Kale, that's Mage Apprentice Handbook. Xueqi, put your hand on it. Don't resist the illusion given to you inside. This will be a very precious inheritance. Xueqi gently placed his hand on it, and a system notification immediately appeared. Host, unknown nervous system transmission detected. After examination, the risk is less than 3%. Do you accept the transmission? Yes. As a strange blue arcane energy was injected into the last page from the old man's hand, the elvish characters on the page seemed to come to life. They wriggled and twisted on the page, then began to combine with each other, shuttling back and forth, forming new arcane patterns. Detected a new magic circuit construction method. Function: enhance the absorption of arcane energy. After examination, it will greatly increase the host's absorption of arcane energy from the two branches of evocation arcane and fire. It is recommended that the host synchronously polarize part of his arcane circuit. The system elf still faithfully performed its duty. Xueqi's vision was completely replaced, and an illusion of a starry sky appeared in front of him. Even the existence of Xueqi seemed to have disappeared. He didn't need to breathe, didn't need to think. It felt as if his entire body had transformed into thousands of thin mental threads. He could clearly feel that his spirit was being stimulated by an inexplicable force. In every thread of his spirit, there was magical power surging wave after wave like the tide. Then, countless mental threads began to intertwine, forming what looked like braids, and these braids intertwined to form an even larger strip. The barrier between the mental threads melted at some point, and the small threads became small tubes. Then, the small tubes merged into an even larger tube. When the tube became incomparably thick in Xueqi's vision, finally, the long tube wound into a closed circle that connected the end to the end. Xueqi could clearly see that the radiance of arcane energy was surging in the huge tube. They kept hitting and slapping the scab-like barrier at the end of the tube that had already been fused into one. It seemed that the arcane energy in the tube was not enough to break through this barrier. But at the last moment, an indescribable external mental wave rose again. It was as if after climbing the highest peak of a mountain, an illusory higher peak suddenly appeared in the clouds, pulling up Xueqi's imagination and understanding of power by more than a level. No, this was definitely not an ordinary technique, where there was always a mountain higher than the previous one. Not only did Xueqi feel the old man's power, but there was also an unfamiliar and mysterious power. That power was filled with a gentle feeling of heat. He suddenly realized this was probably the mental power left behind by the High Elf Sun King and Astrian. Xueqi didn't know if Kale, that had enjoyed this benefit before. In any case, this mental power was now all for Xueqi's benefit. A gigantic circular magic circuit model appeared in his spiritual sea. At this moment, Duke's body was like a 3D printer, perfectly replicating himself according to the model, like a projection. One dot, one line, one side, one three-dimensional, slowly projected, slowly shaped. Xueqi could see that this was no longer a simple magic circuit. There were also countless mysterious blue pentagrams on the magic circuit. After these symbols took shape, they began to absorb the free arcane energy in the surrounding air like the suckers of an octopus. The colorful light spots were filtered by the pentagrams on the circuit and then entered the circuit. They were already pure arcane energy. Although the light spots that were absorbed were like thin soap bubbles, they were indeed increasing the total amount of arcane energy in the circuit. Not only did it increase the energy, but it also strengthened the pulse in the circuit. Unlike the blood vessels in the human body that simply bore the burden of blood, the arcane energy that flowed at a high speed was actually quietly expanding the width of the circuit, making it wider and the walls of the circuit more elastic and thicker. In his trance, Xueqi seemed to hear the voice of Old Man Norton. The voice was a little blurred, as if separated by a thick curtain of water, with an incredible echo. He was still sure that it was the old man's voice. "Little lunatic. I only asked you to learn how to build your own magic circuit, not to do it on the spot. Crazy. Crazy. Really crazy." Xueqi knew very well that a huge magic circuit had already taken shape in his body. It was the most basic arcane circuit in the magic circuit. Just like in the game, Arcane Circuit was the engine of a mage's magic energy. A mage's talent was either arcane magic plus frost or arcane magic plus fire. Without arcane magic, there was no endurance, and the magic power would quickly run out. He didn't know what level his magic circuit was now, but the private goods that the Sun King had passed on to his precious son definitely couldn't be too bad. "All right, young man, don't be greedy. Let's end it." The old man's voice came again in his trance. At this moment, Xueqi realized that he couldn't stop. A hole suddenly opened in the arcane circuit, and a new batch of mental power threads sprouted like bamboo shoots after a rain. "Damn it!" the old man cursed. In the next second, his voice was suddenly cut off, but the mental power that came from him didn't disappear. Xueqi didn't have the slightest idea. This wasn't what he thought. It seemed that the mental power that the Sun King had left in this notebook was to build the next huge magic circuit in one go. He suddenly knew why. Kale, that's. In the game, Kale, that's always had a few magic balls that were a mixture of arcane and fire floating above his head in an extremely flashy manner. That was not only a way for him to train his magic abilities, but also a way to store magic power. He then thought about how Kale, that's moves were mostly related to fire. Then, it wasn't difficult to guess that the Sun King's tactic was definitely the arcane fire, which was a dual element of arcane magic and fire. Since the arcane circuit was built, it naturally wouldn't allow Xueqi to give up halfway and not build the remaining flame circuit. Xueqi only felt that his mental power was burning like firewood. It was a feeling like his whole body was in a furnace. His skin was scorched by the high temperature, and even his hair seemed to be burnt. Every blood vessel in his body was no longer flowing with blood, but hot lava. The intense heat dominated his mind, making it impossible for him to suppress the manic feeling in his heart. "I need to vent. I need to vent." Roar. Xueqi didn't know if he was roaring out loud. If he was not in the spiritual world but in reality, his roar would probably sound like some kind of violent ancient behemoth. There was no time to rest at all. It was as if he had just climbed up from the bottom of the Grand Canyon and was immediately asked to climb the peak of Mount Hyjal. Chapter 53. Building the arcane circuits had consumed most of Xueqi's energy. Xueqi wanted to take a break, but he couldn't give it up. This was an all-out attack. If he failed this time, he didn't know how much he would have to pay and how much more torture he would have to endure before he could attack again. Gritting his teeth, he had to do it. At that moment, the magic power spurting out of the arcane circuits was like a geyser of oil, and every drop of power that spurted out was ignited and transformed into fire elements. Xueqi didn't know that at this moment, he had also caused great trouble for the old man. The fire elements that escaped from Xueqi seemed to have moved all the flames of Stormwind City and condensed them into the narrow room. There were so many fire elements in the room that almost all the combustible objects in the room were ignited. Old Man Norton was fine with his magic shield, but Xueqi and the chair he was sitting on, the coffee table, and even the walls were set ablaze. Unable to withstand the high temperature and pressure of the fire elements, all the glass windows in the room exploded instantly. Huge tongues of fire first rose into the air, and then countless fire elements poured down from the windows as if they had turned into liquid. There were as many waterfalls of fire as there were windows. The waterfalls of fire were like water, hitting the grass and instantly turning it into coke. A large amount of fire elements exploded, turning into huge misty fireballs. The fireballs exploded when they hit solid obstacles, sputtering countless flame arrows in all directions of the yard. Oh! Aitana, who was waiting outside the yard, let out a scream. Darnielle had already grabbed her the moment the window exploded, pulling her with him as he turned and ran. The torrent of flames that was more than a person's height almost burned their butts. Darnielle was so scared that he didn't even look back. He ran 2 houses away and didn't dare to stop until he was behind a mage's laboratory that had a magic shield. Flames overflowed around Old Man Norton's laboratory and spread over all the trees in the yard. With a crackling sound of wood burning and trees collapsing, Old Man Norton's entire yard was finished. Even the 4 yards of the other mages were involved in this vortex of destruction. The only good thing was that this was the experimental area of the academy. Most mages were little princes who were courting death. Regarding the mages' explosive experiments, it could be said that the academy already had a contingency plan. Only the yard was affected. Once the waves of fire touched the buildings, brilliant magic lights immediately lit up. The magic shield on the building was activated. They withstood the impact of the waves of fire very well. As a result, the waves of flames could only continue to advance through the gaps between the buildings, carrying a large amount of debris such as wood and soil. It's a bit like squeezing toothpaste. Originally, the range of the sea of fire was only a few dozen meters. However, due to the compression, the firewall continued to push forward in all directions for more than 100 meters before it stopped. All the mages and apprentices in the Royal Magic Academy were alarmed. What the hell, who's ascending? Such exaggerated magic fluctuations. Is it Khadgar? No, it's not him. That's Norton's laboratory? Could it be? While the others were discussing, Darnielle and the others did not know. Still in a state of shock, they looked at the experimental area around them that had completely changed. Their mouths were wide open, but not a single word came out. All the roads and streets were charred black. Black charcoal dust blew everywhere. Half of the stone statues on the main road of the experimental area were smoked black. Did Xueqi do this? Aitana was still in shock. Probably. Darnielle did not dare to be sure. As the person involved, Xueqi's great undertaking of shaping the magic circuit was still ongoing. He only felt a loud boom in his mind. It was as if a huge and blazing power had exploded in an area of his mind that had never been touched by his consciousness. Like a mountain exploding, the flame power that despised Xueqi's mind for being too small opened up a space in Xueqi's mind. The flames exploded, and the countless exploding fireballs were actually wrapped in a large number of fiery red threads of mental power that represented flames. They shot out from the gap in the arcane circuit. It was like a proud emperor ordering his messengers to ride in circles. Wherever the horse went, it was his territory. It was the same for the thin thread of flame spiritual power. It was actually trying to make a bigger circle than the arcana circuit. What the hell? This is simply courting death. Xueqi's face turned green. In his ears, the system elf's warning kept ringing. Warning! Warning! The arcane energy in the host's body is not enough to complete the construction of the flame magic circuit. At this rate, the host's energy will be drained in 3 minutes and 57 seconds. All the mental power in the host's body will be exhausted, and he will die. Not to mention the system elf, even Xueqi was going crazy with anxiety. Is there any alternative? It was obvious that Xueqi had been tricked unintentionally. When Kale, was building his own arcane fire magic circuit, his situation was definitely different from Xueqi's. Even if he did not have the pure magic power of the Sunwell as a backup, as the Sun King's most valued heir, He definitely had other means of supplying magic power. But this was Stormwind City, and Xueqi did not know if there was a ley line or a source of magic power here. If he was caught off guard, it would definitely be too late. Is there any alternative? This was the second time Xueqi had asked. Scanning, protective measures detected, but require a password to activate. Host, do you want to enter the password now? Yes, try Kale, that's for me. Comparing the original handbook and translation. Automatically converting the common language into High Elven. Testing password error. Please re-enter. Sun King? Error. Sunwell? Sindorii? Sweetheart? High Elven Light? Error. Error. Still an error. Xueqi was about to go crazy. He was about to be drained dry, and he still had to foolishly test the password here? Sunstrider? Ashes. Xueqi tried more than 100 passwords in one go, and the results were all F***king wrong. Isn't there something that automatically inputs a large number of passwords and automatically tests the correctness? Host, you're talking about a simple password with 10 numbers from 0 to 9, A to Z, and all the symbols on the keyboard. The system can try to use high-speed password changing methods to hit this kind of password. But this is a password, and it's impossible to activate the protection program if you can't say the correct password. Yes, it seems that there must be a corresponding tone. F***CK. Do I still have to rely on the Sunwell? With his life hanging by a thread, Xueqi could not help but curse. F***CK. Do I still have to rely on the Sunwell? Congratulations, host, the password is correct. Xueqi's face was full of embarrassment. Chapter 54. Xueqi suddenly understood why. For the Sun King, if Kale, that's who was tall, rich and handsome, could not create 2 magic circuits of arcane fire in one go despite being so well prepared, it could only mean that Kale, that's was useless, or that the idea of not using the Sunwell to construct a general magic circuit was not feasible. In a rage, it was only natural that the Sun King would say such a command. However, after the protective measures were triggered, Xueqi felt a headache coming on. Most of the time, flames were not gentle things. The Sun King's arcane fire represented not only brilliance, but also destruction and dominance. Of course, Xueqi hoped that with a shake of his body, the the tyrannical aura of a king would erupt, and the power of heaven and earth would submit to him. However, the reality was, oh my god, the flame circuit was making a cameo appearance as a robber. If the main body was not enough, he would make up for it by robbing. There was no room for Xueqi and the system elf to refute at all. The flame circuit turned into the most ruthless robber. Countless tiny flame spiritual lines extended from the circuit and spread in all directions at high speed, rushing towards all places with magic energy. Xueqi almost spat out a mouthful of blood. If he did not rob it, he would die. If he robbed it, he would at most slowly wipe his ass later. Xueqi gritted his teeth. Either he did not rob it, or he would rob the biggest one. Seeing how fierce the flame circuit was, how could an ordinary source of magic satisfy it? He knew very well that the homes of the little mages around him were like bank counters without much money, so Xueqi simply instructed it to extend its evil hand to the most valuable treasury in Xueqi's eyes. Mediva's Mage Tower. That's right, Mediva's real nest was indeed in Karazhan. However, as the court mage of Stormwind, Mediv also had a mage tower in Stormwind City as a foothold. Mediv was evil. Mediv was the boss. Defeat the boss and distribute the equipment. Wasn't that fair and just? Unknowingly, Xueqi was already a little crazy. He was completely unaware that he was in a state of lacking moral integrity. The side effect of lowering his moral bottom line had already affected him imperceptibly. Trespassing into another mage's mage tower without permission was equivalent to declaring war on that mage. I don't care. Taking the Sun King's magic circuit secret book was already a bad deal. He was still in the midst of cultivation, yet he was attacking Mediva's Magus Tower? Ignore. If Sargeras, the king of demons, really put aside his pride and refused to let Mediv be a good role model of a righteous elder, and refused to forgive Xueqi magnanimously, then Mediv, whose wizard tower was attacked, had every reason to kill Xueqi. So what? What does it have to do with me? As if possessed, Xueqi let the flame circuit attack Mediva's mage tower, which was 50 meters away. However, fate seemed to have played a joke on Xueqi. Originally, Xueqi was prepared to snatch it openly. At most, he would just change his face and run away. Who would have thought that the thin thread of spiritual power from his flame circuit would actually circle around Mediva's mage tower and leave? Furthermore, it had silently returned with a belly full of fat. It didn't trigger any of the mage tower's magic seals at all. What was going on? After calming down, Xueqi's curiosity was about to explode. The system elf said, "Host." After testing, the flame circuit has triggered the resonance of 38 magic jades and 112 magic yellow crystals. These magic gems seem to actively provide energy to the flame circuit without triggering the mage tower's magic protection. Xueqi was dumbfounded. Damn, that works. Xueqi knew that magic gem study was a unique subject in the world of Azeroth. Mages like to store their excess magic power in a series of special gems that could store magic power. This was so that they could absorb the magic power from the gems at critical times and save their lives. This principle was the same as ordinary people storing dry rations in case of emergencies. The magic power stored in the gems would also slowly decay over time. This was a very long process, usually a few months. High-quality gems could store most of the magic power for years without dissipating. Host, after scanning, these gems seem to have elvish carvings on them. Xueqi understood. The Sun King, no. This should be a backdoor that the entire elven race had secretly left for their own people. If humans fell out with the elves at critical times, that would be terrible. Well, at least now there would be no evidence of him stealing all the magic rations stored in Mediv. Was stealing from an evil superboss counted as stealing? Of course not. This was enjoying the spoils of war. Needless to say, Xueqi really enjoyed the process of not defeating the boss but being able to share the spoils of war. All right. The proud and violent flame magic circuit was full, and it started working. Following the guidance of the mental strength in the flame magic circuit, a new circuit was rapidly forming in Xueqi's body. Like an iron chain, the two circuits, the flame circuit and the arcane circuit, were intertwined like a ring. The flame circuit was derived from the arcane circuit, but it was also very different from the arcane circuit. The arcane circuit was like the earth that carried all things, firm and thick. On the other hand, the flame circuit was like a house built on the ground. It was a typical superstructure. After the gentle magic power was transferred from the arcane circuit to the flame circuit, the magic power would circulate in the flame circuit at a faster speed than the arcane circuit. In the process, the magic power would be rapidly polarized and become more suitable for use in flame magic. System notification. Flame circuit completed. Congratulations, host. You have officially completed the creation of the arcane fire magic circuit. The host's magic ability has been greatly improved. From now on, the host's magic power consumption for using arcane magic is 65% of the theoretical value in the book, and the magic power consumption for flame magic is 80% of the theoretical value. The offensive magic damage of all arcane magic and flame magic will automatically be maximized. After inspection, because the magic power absorbed this time has only reached the minimum value to construct the flame magic circuit, there is still room for great improvement in this circuit. I hope the host will further improve it in the future. Because the host can now automatically absorb the free arcane magic and flame energy within a radius of 30 meters around the host, the simple formula for calculating the magic power is no longer applicable. The host will have to figure out the specific situation on his own. Your current mage level is a level 9 earth mage. After reading the notification in one breath, he looked at the two tightly intertwined magic circuits in his spiritual world. Xueqi found that, as the system notification said, the flame magic circuit was not perfect. Although the two rings were the same size, it was easy to see that in the arcane circuit, arcane energy was abundant. Countless arcane streams of light filled the entire circuit. In the flame circuit, only half of the space had the light of flames flowing through it. Chapter 55. Xueqi frowned. It seemed that this was all he could do for the time being. Duke didn't have much to complain about. He was lucky enough to complete the foundation even though he was blindly trying to do so. With the arcane fire circuit inherited from the High Elf King, Xueqi was already luckier than most mages. Xueqi slowly opened his eyes, and what came into view was old Norton, who was still in shock and hiding in the magic shield, even trembling a little. "You finished building your magic circuit?" the old man asked tentatively. "Yes. I'm afraid I'll have to call the elf Prince Kale, that senior brother from now on, Xueqi said playfully. The old man almost fainted from fear. Please don't scare me. Learning the inheritance of the elves. No. The elven king without permission will be very troublesome. It's okay, the Sun King is very fast. Xueqi wanted to say that it wouldn't be long before the Sun King died, but he suddenly remembered that the secrets of heaven could not be revealed, so he shut his mouth. What's wrong with the Sun King? Nothing. If this gets out of hand, the person who sent me the letter will take the blame. Xueqi didn't really want Aurelia to take the blame. He was thinking about how to further modify his magic circuit so that in the future, even if the Sun King stood in front of him, he wouldn't be able to see it. Yes, where did you go to collect the magic power just now? Xueqi looked at the dull magic power gems at the old man's feet and suddenly felt a heartache. The old man had even compensated him for the cost of his coffin in order for him to build the arcane circuit. Not wanting to implicate old Norton, Xueqi made a shushing gesture. I went to borrow some from the Mediv. Unexpectedly, the old man cried out strangely. Impossible! The guardian has been missing since last Wednesday. Without any warning, he was neither in Stormwind nor back to Karazhan. Xueqi's heart skipped a beat, and started to beat wildly. Mediv is missing. Xueqi, who was familiar with the history of the world of Azeroth, knew what this meant. Medivh's disappearance was a major event for Stormwind and the entire world. While Mediv was missing, Sargeras was no longer satisfied with hiding in the dark and secretly influencing Medivh's decisions. Sargeras began to devour Medivh's soul. When Mediv reappeared in front of the people of Stormwind, he would trigger the most famous event in history, the Dark Portal, and bring the orcs into the world of Azeroth. This was also the beginning of a series of upheavals and apocalyptic crises in the world of Azeroth. At this moment, Xueqi finally felt that the seemingly stagnant wheel of history was still moving in an irreversible direction. Xueqi couldn't help but be speechless. Okay, I admit that I took the mana from the mana crystal that Mediv put in the Mage Tower. But I didn't take it. It was the Sun King's backdoor. Xueqi told Norton about the backdoor that the Sun King had left with his mental power. The old man was both happy and shocked. He was happy that nothing would happen to him and Xueqi this time. He was shocked that the elves were not kind. They actually held back the mana gems that they had given to the humans. Seeing the old man's fear, Xueqi comforted the old man. Don't worry, I have the Pearl Sea route now. At most, I'll go back and buy a batch of mana gems to compensate Mediv. It would be strange if he would compensate. The next time he saw Mediv, that guy would already be the boss of the Burning Legion. He didn't go and kill the boss, but gave the boss a gift? I'd be crazy to do this. Of course, Xueqi's move still comforted the old man very well. When Xueqi proposed to compensate the old man for the mana crystals, the old man refused. There's no need. I don't have any children. I've been studying arcane spells for most of my life. It wasn't until recently that I suddenly realized that I was really old that I remembered that I should accept a disciple. Although you're not my disciple in the real sense, I treat you as my last disciple. Aitana might be better. She's expected to become a sky mage. But Darnielle will be lucky if he can become an earth mage in this lifetime. The old man put his hand on Xueqi's shoulder. I'll rely on you to help pass on my research. Xueqi's eyes couldn't help but turn red and moist. It was like a father giving birth to a son, and a son giving birth to a grandson. In the world of mages, inheritance was just like that. Many times, for the continuation of knowledge, many things were done without asking for anything in return. You don't have to be surprised. When you're old, you'll think the same. Alright, now that you have a very solid foundation, you can officially learn my arcane techniques from tomorrow onwards. Got it. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the room. It should be the guards and the mages on duty rushing over. Hey! Abela Norton, you old ghost, are you dead yet? If you're dead, just grunt. A rude shout came from outside the window. Flit, you're dead, but I'm not dead. Old man Norton roared back in annoyance. Very good. Then what about that little guy Duke Marcus? After a while, you'll be able to sit on the Sky Mage seat with him. Oh damn it. I've lived my life in vain. Right, where should I send the bill? Here or at Marcus's? We've lost a lot this time. It can't be settled without a few thousand gold coins. At the mention of a few thousand gold coins, Old Man Norton's head shrank. Of course it'll be handled by that kid Marcus himself. Xueqi was tongue-tied. The gratitude he felt from the old man not needing him to pay for the crystals was gone. Hey, what happened to the mentor taking care of everything? Give me back my gratitude. Facing Xueqi's aggrieved gaze, Old Man Norton decisively changed the subject. Right. Your foundation in arcane magic has been built very well. Now it's time to strengthen your understanding of arcane magic. Starting tomorrow, you'll come to me to learn arcane magic techniques. All right, I'll just treat it as tuition. After this day, the entire academy knew that Xueqi had advanced to a 9th grade earth mage. All the official mages looked at Xueqi differently. At first, Xueqi didn't understand. Later, it was the old man who told him that in the world of mages, only those who could truly form a magic circuit and continuously absorb the magic power drifting in the atmosphere would be recognized as true mages. The standard of being able to cast 3 level 1 spells was purely for the convenience of determining the boundary between a mage and an apprentice. In the following days, Xueqi focused on learning arcane magic techniques from Old Man Norton, which was metamagic abilities. It was different from the kind of special effects that could be obtained by simply adding points in games. In a situation where even the system elf couldn't analyze it, Xueqi could only be like a real apprentice, constantly using his own senses to perceive. Again and again, he repeated this in constant failure and practice. The number of failures was so many that Xueqi couldn't remember how many times he had failed. Finally, Xueqi succeeded. Arcane subtlety reduces your target's resistance to all your spells. The specific effect depends on whether you can grasp the target's weakness in actual combat. Arcane focus gives you a 10% chance of entering the energy-saving spellcasting state after casting any kind of damaging spell. The energy-saving spellcasting state can reduce the mana consumed by your next damaging spell by 100%. Arcane meditation allows you to maintain 15% mana recovery speed when casting spells. Just when Xueqi thought that his days of research would continue indefinitely, a magic imprint on his hand heated up. Chapter 56. Mage Imprint Communication was a simple means of magic communication. Anyone who knew magic could use it, but the distance of the communication depended on the spellcaster's magic cultivation. That night, Xueqi pretended to go to Storm Harbor to inspect the shipbuilding progress, and then came to a stone beach near the harbor. The rugged boulders hid everything well. Even if a ball was hidden here, it would not be easily seen by the naked eye. Come out, Xueqi said lightly. Master. Naga Walla stacked her arms on her shoulders and bowed to Xueqi. What's the matter? Walla went straight to the point. The Grey Scale clan is here. They have already crossed the reef sea opposite Stranglethorn Vale, and tomorrow they will reach the sea opposite Dagger Ridge, the southernmost part of the western wilderness. I have ordered the old blind man, who is entrenched in the southwest of the wilderness and the lighthouse of the western wilderness, to evacuate with his clansmen. It is expected that they will arrive at our new camp when the sun rises the day after tomorrow. At the same level, a Naga could easily deal with 10 murlocs. It was not only a problem of combat power, but also the natural coercion of high-ranking creatures over low-ranking creatures, which would make the murlocs unable to exert 50% of their combat power. Rashly letting the murlocs fight would only be courting death. Xueqi raised his chin slightly. You did well. Walla bowed deeply and then said, There's more. Congratulations on your promotion, Master. As soon as I came near Storm City, I could feel the surging magic from Master in the imprint. Xueqi was a little stunned, and then smiled. You won't regret following me. You go back first. I will appear when the time comes. Walla nodded and bowed again, then turned around, swaying her long snake tail, and the green figure disappeared into the waves of the sea. Xueqi looked at Walla's back meaningfully. This female Naga should have held back. She might have been injured before, causing her strength to decline. Now that she had caught her breath, her strength had recovered a lot. It just so happened that Xueqi's magic circuit was formed. Xueqi didn't care about Walla's thoughts. Firstly, his imprint could tell Walla how strong or weak he was. Secondly, as long as Walla couldn't afford the price of betrayal, then she would always be loyal. Turning around, Xueqi went to look for Makarov. The next morning before dawn, the fishermen were already preparing to go out to sea to fish. An important guest had arrived at the dock, the Earth Magician, Duke Marcus. Makarov and a dozen mercenaries followed behind Duque. There was a high platform next to the report board at the dock. Usually, it was used to announce important events. Today, Duque's blue and white mage robe was so dazzling that many fishermen didn't even dare to look Duque in the eye. Makarov and his men were all dressed in brand new leather armor, with daggers tied to their waists and legs. It was the typical attire for naval warfare. Duque nodded slightly. Makarov stepped forward and shouted to the fishermen. Now, the owner of the Pearl Route, a member of the royal family's mages, the Earth magician Duke Marcus has a slightly dangerous business to do. Slightly dangerous? Big business? Looking for us fishermen? The fishermen were a little surprised, but also a little excited. The Pearl Route's cargo ships entered and left the port almost every day under their noses. Those who were hired were all newbies who didn't have a ship, but now? Those fellows were paid twice the wages of ordinary sailors. Just by sailing the ship for a 2-day round trip, one or two of them had already made a fortune. There were no murlocs, no naga, no sea beasts, and they were earning a salary that the fishermen were extremely envious of. They were often reprimanded by their families for not catching up to the good times and making their first bucket of gold in the Pearl Route. The more peaceful the era, the easier it was to stimulate people's risk-taking genes. Looking at the two mercenaries beside Makarov carrying a large chest of gold coins, the fisherman's eyes were worth it. There was surprise but also joy. The surprise was that the fisherman's wages were definitely not worth the gold coins. The joy was that this was definitely a big business. Makarov continued to shout with a slightly hoarse voice. Rest assured, Sir Marcus is not asking you to do some pirate business. Now, a group of Naga is about to attack Sir Marcus's warehouse. Sir Marcus wants you to sink your old fishing boat to a designated place and catch those damned Naga in one fell swoop. In exchange, Sir Marcus will compensate you with a brand new fishing boat of the same size, or directly buy it for 500 gold coins. Every fisherman who takes the risk to sink their boat will be compensated with 2 gold coins. In the case of misfortune, it will be 10 gold coins. Everyone can get gold coins before setting sail. At this time, the bare-chested old man Jackson went on stage. Sir Marcus has ordered an additional 40 boats from me. The money for the shipbuilding will be paid in advance. You can get any kind of fishing boat you want from me. Old Jackson's words were more convincing than Makarov's. A fisherman was tempted. He asked in a trembling voice, We only need to sink the old fishing boat to a designated place, then swim away, and we can get a new boat and get the bounty? Yes. Sir Marcus will personally take care of those hateful Naga, while our mercenary group will take everyone back to Stormport on the boat in the back. All right, now Sir Marcus needs 10 fishing boats. Who will come? With a great reward, there were bound to be brave men. On average, a fisherman would get 2 or 3 silver coins for a trip to the sea. Besides, was there no risk in going to the sea? Nowadays, fishermen were accompanied by danger all day long. Even in the coastal waters, there were still huge sharks, fishmen, and a mess of sea monsters. Therefore, let alone 10 gold coins, even if it was 1 gold coin, many people would still be willing. Me. Mine. I've wanted to replace that broken boat for a long time. Vara did not know what was going on in Storm City. The female Naga leader only knew that she was in big trouble. With Duque's support, she had gathered half of the fishmen clans in the western wilderness as her subordinates. Now, half of the shallow bay was filled with those noisy fishmen, no less than 2,000 of them. At a glance, such an astonishing number was enough to take down a human town. But Vara knew very well that unless Duque was here, these fishmen were a bunch of weaklings who could only fight with the wind. A male Naga with a long scar on the left side of his face, extending from his forehead to the corner of his mouth, and even blind in his left eye, came over with a huge trident with a blade wider than a human body. High Priest, the latest news has come. This time, Grayscale has nearly 400 Nagas, and has also commanded more than 3,000 fishmen. We say no more. Chapter 57. It was another dawn. The vast surface of the sea was suffused with a blue radiance. However, if one looked carefully, they would discover that there were many strange figures swimming at high speed in the clear shallow sea. Like a school of migrating fish attracted by the intersection of cold and warm ocean currents, countless murlocs the size of trolleys began to attack a bay in the northern part of the western wilderness. The bay was not big. The crescent-shaped entrance was about 60 meters wide. Once one entered, one would enter the shallow water area with a depth of less than 2 meters. If this place was not filled with murlocs that had no sense of beauty at all, it might be a perfect beach. The huge murlocs were like a black tide, surging at the entrance of the bay, dyeing the entire outside of the bay. At the entrance of the bay, a male naga swam in. His huge snake tail swayed in the waves, supporting his majestic upper body above the water surface. Waving a trident, the strong male naga with gray scales shouted arrogantly, "Seeing that we are also from Queen Azhara, hand over the baby and the human who killed our chief warrior. The Gray Scale clan will give you a chance to put down your weapons and surrender. This is the territory of the 100-handed death god Xueqi. If the Gray Scale clan does not want to be exterminated, get lost." Vara raised his scepter high and shouted at the other party. The male naga showed a sarcastic expression. He shook his head as if he knew this would happen. His figure disappeared into the water. "Is that human so reliable?" The one-eyed male naga beside Vara could not help but ask. "No, I'm just tired of running, and I don't want to surrender." Vara turned his head and looked at his most loyal subordinate with his greenish-brown eyes. He then glanced at the newly built nest. "Gennard, if the battle is not going well, take them and leave. They are our last hope." The male naga called Gennard seemed to be reluctant, but he nodded heavily in the end. "Understood." In the distance, there was a continuous sound of water splashing, like boiling water. The black color outside the bay dyed the mouth of the bay at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, accompanied by a series of strange squeaks unique to murlocs, the army of murlocs charged to the edge of the beach in the blink of an eye. The surging momentum was like a huge wave hitting the shore. It was very frightening. Unfortunately, the raging waves beating the shore only had momentum. The merfolk's huge wave was shattered by a different kind of shore. "Throw the axe." Over 1,000 simple short axes spun in a wondrous manner from high up on the shore. It was as if a sudden heavy rain had poured down, almost instantly extinguishing the morale of the attacking murlocs that had just been stirred up. Skinning axe. Duque had obtained the blueprint from Hogg. This was the simplest kind of axe. It was made by tying a sharp stone that could be seen everywhere on the beach to a wooden stick with a thick rope. For humans, unless they were primitive people, no one would use such a crude battle axe. But for the slightly retarded murlocs, this was the best throwing weapon. The long-range attacks easily crushed the morale of the attacking fishmen. The group of fellows turned around and fled at a speed even faster than when they came. For a moment, the battle formation was in chaos. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Vara raised his scepter, and all the defending murlocs jumped into the sea one after another, fighting with the murlocs who were trying to escape. If it was a brilliant commander paired with strictly disciplined soldiers, they might be able to use the terrain to repeatedly consume the opposite side's forces, but the murlocs? Well, that was the case with their retardation. Anyway, one side had to escape, and the other side had to chase, so at least there would be some results. But as the Gray Scale clan became ruthless and threw a large number of male nagas into the battlefield, the situation developed in a direction that was not favorable to the furious Scale clan. The male nagas had burly bodies comparable to trolls. When they stood up, they were easily more than 2 meters tall. Even on land, without 3 or 5 Stormwind city soldiers, they would not be able to handle them. Where there was water, they were even better at hand-to-hand combat. They waved their huge tridents, as if they were chopping melons and vegetables, easily chopping the murlocs who dared to come forward on the furious Scale clan's side into minced meat. After a few tests, the murlocs only dared to use the skinning axe and the murloc wise's frost arrows for long-range attacks. But the effect was not great. As an aquatic race, the male naga had good ice magic resistance and extremely thick scales. Wrapped around the explosive muscles were fish scales that were comparable to armor. The murloc's attacks could hardly hurt them at all. At this time, a female naga with gray scales all over her body appeared in the bay. "Vara, I'll give you one last chance, kneel under my tail. The naga siren who has the ability to cast spells should not die so easily." "I refuse." "Then you can die. I will find your young females and teach them well." Ha 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 ha. The Naga clan was a matriarchal clan, and the females who had the ability to cast spells were the masters. The strength of a Naga clan was often not measured by the size of the population, nor by the number of slaves, but by the number of female Naga who had the ability to cast spells. If there were not enough females in their own clan, they would rob other families' female cubs, and then cultivate them into helpers of their own clan. This was the way the Naga clan survived and expanded. Come on. Vara was furious. One of her arms held the scepter, and the other two suddenly pulled out 4 sharp scimitars from the scabbards behind her waist. Those were exquisite weapons that should not have come from the Naga clan. The cold light of the scimitars was reflected in the sparkling light, and the warriors of the Grayscale clan could not help but be stunned. Those were expensive weapons from the Iron Stove Castle's dwarf craftsmen. When Xueqi arrived, the battle had entered the most intense stage. More than half of the Grayscale clan had attacked the beach. On the beach, Vara was besieged by dozens of male Naga. Almost every moment, there were more than 10 tridents slashing at Vara. But Vara took advantage of the small gap between the different movements of the male Naga to fiercely counterattack. Every time when it was about to be hit, Vara's slightly slender upper body, with the support of the coiled snake-like lower body, swayed at high speed like a roly-poly doll, and dodged the fatal attacks in an instant. The scepter kept releasing chilling ice arrows, knocking down the male Naga one by one. The 4 ferocious scimitars released a continuous stream of blade light, chopping off one thick arm after another. Her movements were so fast that she even pulled out a faint afterimage. She was so fierce, but still could not stop the balance of victory from tipping in the Grayscale clan's favor. Because the opponent's priest had not yet made a move. At this time, a clear male voice suddenly came from the mouth of the bay. I heard that you can farm monsters here. Chapter 58. Outside the bay, more than a dozen fishing boats rode the rising tide and rushed towards the mouth of the bay at high speed. They were so fast that the few scouts that the gray-scaled Nagas had set up could not react in time. All the elite warriors had been transferred into the bay, and the small number of Nagas and Murlocs left outside the bay did not even have time to react before they were defeated by Xueqi's magic. The fishermen fearlessly crashed into the mouth of the bay, following the tide and pulling out the plug at the bottom of the cabin with a long rope, allowing a large amount of seawater to pour into the boat. At the same time, they looked for an opportunity to jump into the sea and quickly swam back to Makarov's side. The entire process was done in one go, and it was almost completed before the Nagas realized what was going on. When more than a dozen boats completely blocked the mouth of the bay, Xueqi stood at the top of the largest boat and made that extremely pretentious declaration. I heard that we can farm monsters here? At first, the gray-scaled Nagas and their subordinate Murlocs did not know what it meant. As far as they were concerned, it was ridiculous to think that they could block their way out by using a few broken ships to block the entrance of the bay. But soon they could not laugh. Level 2 spell. Darsong's Cold Prison. Low-level spells also depended on who was using them. If it was the previous Xueqi, it would not be an exaggeration to say that he was squeezed dry n times. But now, Xueqi was an earth mage with a perfect arcane circuit. Xueqi shouted fiercely. A horrifying chill instantly burst out from his body. It was very difficult to simply freeze moving seawater, and Xueqi used a trick of using a sunken ship as a framework. The seawater that turned into ice was stuck by the sunken ship, and in turn, became the support of other ice blocks. Layers of ice were stacked on top of each other, and the entire huge ice dam was almost completed in the blink of an eye. The Nagas and Murlocs blinked and saw that Xueqi was already standing on top of an ice throne that was more than 3 meters above the water, looking down at the gray-scaled Nagas and Murlocs who were tossing and turning in the bay with a calm gaze. In the next moment, the iconic 108 hands of magic appeared in the void. At this moment, Xueqi's aura was astonishing. He was so dazzling that he was like an ice god descending from the heavens. Near the mouth of the bay, a male Naga tried to attack Xueqi just now, but his entire lower body was frozen. He let out bursts of low wails, and the 3 arms that could still move were desperately slapping the ice. Noisy! Xueqi raised his eyebrows coldly. One of the hands of magic in the void suddenly extended its index finger, and a maximized arcane missile accurately pierced through the male Naga's mouth and the back of its head, splashing out an arrow of blood. Naga let out the last whimper of its life. Its tall and majestic body swayed, then fell back onto the ice. There was silence on the battlefield. Everyone who witnessed this scene seemed to have forgotten about time and everything in the outside world. Makarov and the other mercenaries and fishermen subconsciously stopped what they were doing. Apart from the salty smell of the sea and the chill of the icy wind, the air in their nostrils seemed to be filled with excitement, heat, and a hint of a legend. Are all old mages this powerful? Or is it that only Sir Duke Marcus is this powerful? Even though everyone on the boat had their eyes on that ridiculously young figure, Makarov did not forget his current situation. He took a step forward and blocked Duque's line of sight from the dazed helmsman. He pulled out his dagger and swung it in the opposite direction. "What are you standing there for? Turn around immediately. We'll await your triumphant return. Are you trying to shame your name by losing a fisherman?" The subordinates immediately came to their senses and quickly turned the helm, leaving Yang Fan behind. Within the bay, the battle that had paused for a short while began once again. Just like Blind Old Man and Fish Spear, the Murlocs under the gray-scaled Naga's command crumbled the moment they saw Duque's many hands of magic. They cried, screamed, and made all sorts of unintelligible noises. Thousands of Murlocs were thrown into chaos in the middle of the bay. "Kaku, in the name of the mighty god of the sea's hundred-handed reaper, attack!" Blind Old Man and Fish Spear immediately launched a counterattack, cutting down the Naga's Murlocs as if they were vegetables. It's a mess. It's all a mess. Even if the gray-scaled Naga Siren still had the upper hand in terms of high-end combat power, the female gray-scaled Naga Siren priest knew that if Duke subdued all of her Murlocs, the hundreds of Naga Siren would be wiped out. She ordered the strongest male Naga Siren warriors to continue attacking Vara while she personally led her subordinates and charged towards the mouth of the bay. They had to kill Duque and open up a gap. As long as they could get rid of Duque, the Naga Siren's last hope, then everything would be back on track. Duque sneered as he watched the Naga charging towards him. "Hey, System Elf, what's the evaluation result of the plan I proposed to you last time to use Hand of Magic to shoot arcane missiles at the same time?" With the System Elf, it was equivalent to automatically having the metamagic specialty of multicasting. The only difference was in power. After examining the host's arcane circuit, it is recommended that the host fire no more than 80 arcane missiles at a time. The arcane missiles in the world of Azeroth were slightly different. Because a single arcane missile was less powerful, it was generally fired 3 at the same time in a triangle to ensure lethality. Therefore, one shot was 80 hits. Then I might as well reduce it to 36 hits. A large number of hands of magic unfolded into a pair of wings behind Duque. Duque raised his right hand and waved it down forcefully. As if hearing the command of their commander, the hands of magic in the void turned their wrists at the same time and fired 100 shots at the same time. The arcane energy that was the size of a fist was emitted, and the powerful and destructive energy expanded. The resulting bluish-purple light strongly stimulated the eyes of the Naga. Every 36 hands of magic formed a wave, and the 3 rounds of hands of magic seemed to be firing ceaselessly. Without deliberately aiming, Duque poured the barrage of arcane missiles on the place where the Nagas were most concentrated. The Naga's scales, which were like iron plates, were obviously effective in resisting physical attacks, but they obviously couldn't resist Duque's arcane missiles. The arcane missiles, after being polarized, visually looked like long magic spears, tearing the bodies of the Nagas into pieces. Dozens of heavy and sharp tridents were blasted into smithereens, and over 100 majestic bodies were pierced through. If the blood that was floating in the bay earlier was mostly the blood of the Murlocs, then this huge pool of blood now had a new addition: the blood of the gray-scaled Nagas. Chapter 59. At this moment, the light of the sun seemed to have dimmed, and the Nagas who were killed by Duque collapsed in the shallow water less than 1.5 meters deep. They used their corpses to form a violent psychic wave, dispelling the morale of the Murlocs dominated by the gray-scaled Nagas like a hurricane. Ha 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 ha! That human is the real god of the sea, the gray-scaled Nagas are the fake messenger of the sea, we sharp-toothed Murlocs have rebelled. The betrayal of the Murlocs intensified the already chaotic situation in front of them. When the gray-scaled Naga priest found that she could no longer command any Murlocs, and thousands of Murlocs attacked the gray-scaled Nagas at the same time with their clumsy weapons, even if she was stupid, she knew that the situation was hopeless. Retreat. She wanted to lead her people to escape and go straight back to Stranglethorn Vale. But would Duque let them go? Duque himself did not realize that his black pupils were rippling with cold mockery, and he muttered to himself, "Useless guy. Slow reaction. You don't even have the qualifications to be my subordinate." Just like playing a turret defense game, Duque only needed to focus on dealing with the most threatening opponent. As for the miscellaneous soldiers, naturally the system elf would help him aim and shoot. There were many Nagas who rushed to the small iceberg at the mouth of the bay, but none could reach Duque. Suddenly, Duque was shot by frost arrows, which came from the attack of 3 gray-scaled Naga females. A faint smile appeared on Xueqi's face. If he was still injured by these level 1 frost arrows, without the support of metamagic abilities, it would be really embarrassing. He gathered some of his magic, raised his left hand, and an ice wall appeared in the path of the 3 frost arrows that the system calculated would have to pass. The ice arrows hit the ice wall out of thin air, and completely lost the power they should have, and even the cold air became part of the ice wall. It's my turn. Xueqi suddenly gathered most of his magic. The magic consumption of each arcane missile was not high, but it was different for fire spells. Fire spells had always been a big consumption of magic. Xueqi could take 80 arcane missiles at the same time, but he could only take 5 flame bursts. Xueqi's hair seemed to have been ignited from his head to his shoulders. Crimson flames rose more than a meter above his head. The fire magic power from the fire elemental realm gathered in front of the hand of magic in the void. Seeing the 5 huge fireballs suspended in the air, the faces of the gray-scaled Naga siren priests turned pale. They screamed and raised their magic shields. Even the most loyal male Naga siren used his huge body to block between Xueqi and the Naga siren priests, trying to defend their leader with their lives. So what? Under the command of the system elf, purplish-blue arcane missiles descended from the sky, all of them concentrated in one area. In the blink of an eye, the shooting line between Xueqi and the gray-scaled Naga siren priest was cleared. No! The Naga leader screamed and twisted her snake waist in the shallow water, trying to avoid the attack of Flame Blast. Xueqi laughed loudly, and a huge fireball smashed down. Hee hee! Watch my 5 fireballs divine sect. The Naga siren priest's speed was not slow. From the time she started to move to the time the fireball hit, she had already moved 4 meters away from her original position. However, Arcane Fire Circuit not only gave Xueqi abundant arcane and fire magic power, but also gave him more precise magic controllability. The high-speed fireball actually made an unscientific turn in the air, drawing a clear arc in the void. Vara, who was still in the middle of a bloody battle, was dumbfounded. He almost forgot about the battle around him. The gray-scaled Naga siren priest struggled to swim a few steps, and was hit in the face by a flame blast. The magic shield saved her life, allowing her to escape the fate of being the first to be killed. However, this only extended her life for a little longer. After the first hit, she was marked with a must-hit label. No matter how she struggled, moved and resisted, she was still hit by the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th flame blast. The 2nd one charred her whole body. The 3rd one blew up several of her arms. The 4th one blew her waist into 2 pieces. The 5th one was actually already a corpse. Under the gaze of thousands of murlocs and hundreds of Nagas, the dignified gray-scaled Naga siren leader and clan high priest was killed by Xueqi's fire magic in the shallow water area. The intense heat even evaporated all the water around the gray-scaled Naga siren priest in an instant, forming a temporary hole. After a full second, the sea water filled the hole again. At this time, Xueqi's fierce and domineering voice echoed throughout the bay. Who else? Come out! Even if Xueqi used the human language, it did not hinder the murlocs from understanding Xueqi's meaning. Xueqi was forcing the next challenger out. Were there any more challengers? The number 1 male Naga siren warrior of the gray-scaled clan was cut into sashimi by Xueqi. Their chief priest had also become a roasted fish. For a moment, the whole battlefield was dead silent again. Xueqi's domineering and fierce eyes swept from left to right, and found that no one dared to look at him. Xueqi suddenly had the feeling of a max-level mage returning to the novice village to farm monsters. That's good. In the name of the 100-handed death god, I command you surrender to me or die. Thousands of murlocs knelt down, calling out Kakagaro non-stop. The symbol of submission was even translated by the system elf, and Xueqi didn't bother to read it. The only 2 remaining female Naga siren priests of the gray-scaled clan put their 6 arms together and bowed. At the same time, all the surviving male Naga siren also showed their submission. Even if Xueqi had the idea of taking them in, before he killed the gray-scaled leader, there were still more than 100 gray-scaled male Naga siren who were shot into meat paste by arcane missiles. Looking at the more than 280 gray-scaled Nagas, Xueqi suddenly had the idea of killing the gray-scaled Naga siren leader in seconds. At this time, Vara Ringscale Avis, who was bathed in blood and had no less than 10 wounds, swam over. She also bowed deeply. "Congratulations, master." Xueqi glanced at her wounds. "How are your injuries?" "Minor injuries," Vara replied faintly. "Well, from now on, these gray-scaled Nagas and Murlocs will be under your command. Within a month, I want you to move everything of the gray-scaled Naga here." The clever Vara frowned. "Master, why are you in such a hurry? Is something big going to happen?" Was the dark portal a big deal? Of course it was. Of course, Xueqi couldn't tell Vara. "It is indeed a big deal, maybe in 2 or 3 years, maybe in a few months, I can't say for sure. However, this is indeed a super big deal that involves the whole world. You just have to prepare for a large-scale naval battle." Vara knew that as an outsider, she couldn't get Xueqi's complete trust. And Xueqi's performance of descending from the heavens had deeply shocked her. Now, she had no other thoughts. Although she didn't know who her enemy was, Vara bowed deeply again. "As you will." Chapter 60. It was another glorious victory. More witnesses, more spoils of war. For 3 days in a row, the corpse of the gray-scaled Naga leader and hundreds of Murlocs hung in the port of Stormwind. Most of the Naga and Murlocs within 300 nautical miles of Stormwind have been wiped out by His Excellency Duke Marcus. Fishermen, you can fish to your heart's content. If you join our Hurricane Chamber of Commerce, you will receive better protection and better profits. If you don't have a boat, we can lend it to you first. You only need to sign a 5-year labor contract with our Chamber of Commerce, spend no less than 25 weeks at sea every year, and promise to hand over 30% of the catch to the Chamber of Commerce. A brand new fishing boat is yours, and once the contract expires, the fishing boat will belong to you. As one of Xueqi's mouthpieces, Makarov had officially become Xueqi's follower. Now, he often encouraged more fishermen at the docks for Xueqi, and more young men to join Xueqi's newly established Hurricane Chamber of Commerce. In fact, Xueqi used the common method of taxi companies before his transmigration to seduce fishermen or fishermen's descendants who could not find work, and it was really successful. And more varieties of fish and seafood also supported the expansion of Xueqi's business. Especially in the last month, Xueqi had formed a whaling fleet. On the big ship, Xueqi patted a few huge barrels next to him. "This is the float. As long as the javelin tied to the rope hits the whale, we don't need to fight this behemoth at all. We just need to stop it from diving, and when it runs out of strength, victory will be ours." Xueqi's explanation made Windsor, who was standing beside Xueqi, speechless. Yes, Windsor had returned with the craftsman that Xueqi needed. Before he even arrived at Stormwind, he had already heard of Xueqi's reputation in Kul Tiras. A pearl line. In this era where diving was risking your life against Murlocs, Naga, and sharks, most people could only try their luck picking up pearls from the shells that washed up on the beach. But Xueqi continuously produced all kinds of seafloor specialties that made nobles crazy. The appearance of the Pearl Sea route also stimulated the merchants of Kul Tiras. A bet of 500 gold coins? There were more than 2 zeros. Therefore, Windsor simply said that he was sent by the owner of the Pearl Line to recruit craftsmen. In addition, Xueqi managed to convince the Stormwind army to lend him a griffin and have Makarov bring 20,000 gold notes to Windsor. In the end, Windsor had not only brought along a huge team of 200 craftsmen, but also cleared out all the inventory in Kul Tiras shipyards. Unexpectedly, as soon as he returned and saw Windsor's ship, Xueqi had a new idea: a whaling fleet. The others threw the javelin with their arms, but Xueqi was even better. He simply stuck the javelin into the whale's tail with hand of magic. The sailors watched in astonishment as the barrels swayed on the surface of the sea, but did not sink. More than an hour later, the exhausted whale floated to the surface of the water. Seeing this scene, the hundreds of sailors on the 3 whaling ships burst into enthusiastic cheers. Windsor and Makarov were dumbfounded. "Reggie, do you know what this big guy is for?" Reginald Windsor, who was nicknamed Reggie, was still not used to Xueqi's almost blind trust in him and the way he treated him like an old friend. He wanted to do business, but remembered that he had lost the bet, and he was already Xueqi's follower. Sighing in his heart, Windsor asked tentatively, "Can it be eaten?" Xueqi smiled and shook his head. "Most whale meat is not delicious. What I want is inside the whale." Xueqi would not say it out loud. His goal was the ambergris of the sperm whale. That thing made into a perfume would drive the noble ladies of the entire Azeroth human kingdom crazy. He knew what to do in general, and this would be the key stepping stone for Xueqi to open the door to wealth and convenience. Xueqi continued, "Of course I won't waste such a big piece of meat. Drag it back, and I'll tell you how to make it taste good. By the way, whale fat is also good stuff." Duke already had a complete set of soy sauce brewing methods. This was purely something that Duke accidentally remembered when he was bored and asked Baidu what soy sauce was. He would divide the process into multiple parts, each operated by a different master. In fact, the first batch of finished products was already out, and the results were quite good. A few days later, in the Stormwind Palace, King Lang Rin and the Queen, the young prince and princess, and Anduin Lothar saw the royal chef serving him a dish he had never seen before. "This is..." The king looked up and looked strangely at his royal chef. "This is a new dish that has recently appeared in Stormwind. Raw salmon. Fish? That stinky thing? And how do you eat it raw?" In Azeroth, people still did not know how to avoid the smell of fish. In the minds of most nobles, things like fish were eaten by the lower classes. But the royal chef used the method taught by Xueqi to show Lang and Anduin how to pour lemon juice on the iced salmon, and how to eat it raw with wasabi and soy sauce. With the mentality of trying it out, Lang and Anduin tried it. It really tastes special. I think I'm starting to like this stuff." Lang gently wiped his mouth. The little prince and the little princess repeatedly said that they wanted an extra portion. At this time Anduin spoke. "Lang, do you remember Duke Marcus who was in the limelight?" "Of course, the youngest earth mage in our kingdom." When answering, Lang also glanced at the fan-shaped red coral placed in the center of the dining room. The fiery red coral had a radius of nearly a meter, which was given to the king by Xueqi. "Why, this thing was also made by him." "Oh. Isn't he a mage? How did he become a chef?" King Lang was curious. "In fact, this mage Marcus has done a lot of things." Anduin told Lang one by one what Xueqi had done recently. From taking back the Naga and Murlocs, forming the Pearl Sea route, to expanding the fishing range of fishermen, to whaling, to making spices such as soy sauce and wasabi. The more Lang listened, the more he liked it. "I like this little guy. My tax officer has mentioned him to me more than once. He pays taxes on time and in full in one go. It seems that we are going to have a good year. Unfortunately, Medivh is missing, otherwise I would have recommended this dish to him. The problem is that recently, he officially submitted a report to me, hoping to form a whaling team of 200 men using javelins and cannons, and to expand a large stone pier." Chapter 61. What does he want to do? Lang frowned. Lang did not know much about maritime affairs. But Lang knew that even the famous Menethil port only used wooden piers. Only the kingdom of Kurtiras, which had the largest navy, had a large number of ships entering and exiting the port every day, abandoned the wooden piers for the sturdier stone piers. "Your Majesty, I had the same concerns as you at first, but he proved his loyalty in another way. He proposed to fully fund Stormwind to build a navy of 16 medium-sized ships in the form of a gift to you, Your Majesty. He is only responsible for funding. The ships can be ordered from Kurtiras, the cannons from Ironstove Castle, and all the personnel will be provided by us. Even the training fees for the personnel will be covered by him." At this point, even though Anduin tried to explain the proposal in a neutral tone, he could not hide the excitement in his voice. The west side of Stormwind City was the sea. Stormwind had a long coastline, but it could not be used effectively for a long time. Building a navy that could defend the coastline of Stormwind was also one of Anduin's wishes. Lang was not a fool. Everything in front of him came too easily. It was too surreal. If Xueqi tried to build an armed fleet that could beat the navy of Stormwind, Lang would not agree no matter what. He would definitely kill Xueqi's plan in the cradle. But Xueqi cleverly shut the mouths of Lang and the nobles. "It's a little illegal for me to use a ballista, but if I let you use cannons, you won't be afraid, right?" Gunpowder weapons in the world of Azeroth had not yet become popular. Although cannons had a lot of damage, most of them were muzzle-loading cannons. But no matter how outdated cannons seemed, they were not inferior to ballistas in naval battles. Cannons were superior in terms of range and power. Perhaps only the reloading speed of ballistas was slightly faster. After thinking for a while, King Lang cautiously said. What does this Duque lad want? A perfume called Chanel that is about to hit the market will be exclusive rights for 100 years. Anjouan Lothar recalled the words of Duque's messenger, Windsor. He also said that your majesty will soon know the magic of this perfume. Lang did not answer directly. What else? Anjouan Lothar tapped his fingers on the table. He wants to make more money, enough money to build a great mage tower comparable to Karazhan. When King Lang heard this, he smiled. Most of the doubts in his heart were solved. He had heard of Duque's arrogance. He was greater than greatness, surpassing Medivh, who was the guardian of the world. Of course, Lang knew how astronomical the construction costs of a top-notch wizard tower were. It was a terrifying sum that even the entire treasury of Stormwind might not be enough. Now, Duque had talent, not only in magic, but also in business. If that was the goal, then it wouldn't be strange at all. Lang smiled. It shouldn't be a big problem. I'll think about it tonight and give you an answer tomorrow. Okay. Anjouan retreated. Looking at the cluster of beautiful red coral trees, Lang turned and entered the royal study to check the documents. Before he knew it, it was late at night. Lang also felt sleepy. When he returned to the dormitory, he suddenly smelled a very elegant but relaxing scent. It was sweet, tempting, but not stimulating at all. Following the scent, Lang was surprised to find that the source of the scent was actually his lover. The queen was wearing a nightgown and lying on her side on the big bed. Oh, my queen, you're really special tonight. Lang involuntarily rushed up and hugged the queen's slender waist. He sniffed hard, and Lang suddenly felt a warmth start to burn in his lower abdomen. This is the new perfume I just got. Do you like it? The queen smiled sweetly. Oh hell no, it's great. Lang immediately understood what Anjouan meant when he said, You'll soon know the magic of this perfume during the meal. That little fellow Duque actually knew how to bribe the queen. Lang was a little jealous. This thing will turn all men into beasts. Then come and eat me. The queen smiled coquettishly. At this moment, Lang made a decision. That night, the great King Lang had a pleasant night. The next morning, when Anjouan saw the king wearing an unseasonable high-collared shirt, Anjouan immediately understood that His Majesty was trying to hide the mark of passion on his neck. Damn it! This is the first time I hate how smart you are. The king was a little dumbfounded. Well, Your Majesty, what's your decision? I agree, but there's an additional condition. In exchange for my protection of his business, I need him to take out an additional sum of money to help repair the walls of Stormwind City. Your Majesty, your shrewdness has illuminated the entire kingdom. Anjouan did not forget to show off his cleverness. I wonder who it is that asks me for money every few days to repair the walls. Lang pretended to be angry. Ha 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 ha. The king and his minister laughed heartily in the palace. When the king's counter-proposal reached Duque, not only Makarov, but even Windsor showed an indignant expression. Your Majesty, you've really opened your lion's mouth this time. Your Majesty, you're just a little rich, and yet you want Your Majesty to bear the burden of so many things. Windsor spat harshly. Reggie, make a trip for me. Tell him I agree, Duque said calmly. Yes, I'll help you reject. Wait, you said you agree? Even Windsor, the loyal minister of Stormwind City, opened his mouth in shock. I have as many ways to earn money as I want, but there are some things that can't be made up for once I miss it. Duque did not explain further. From the window of the small house that Anjouan gave him, he looked at the buildings of Stormwind City that rose and fell along with the mountains. This was not the first time Duque had been acting mysteriously. Makarov and Windsor, who rarely interacted with mages, thought that all mages were like this. Duque did not want to explain, because no one would believe him even if he did. Stormwind City was destroyed during the first orc invasion, and Duque had always felt that it was a pity. Because of this, there were many tragedies. It was not just this massacre, but also the tragedy of the nobles not paying for the reconstruction when Stormwind City was rebuilt. He did not know if what he was doing could change the fate of Stormwind City. But in order to make up for the regret in his heart, he tried his best to do what he could. He did not want to achieve it, but only to do it. That was why Duque was willing to be blackmailed by Lang. He was not sure if Medivh would be like history. Feeling that time was tight, Duque felt that he had to at least have a certain amount of power and authority before the Dark Portal incident. Without noble status, the only way to truly integrate into the noble circle in the corrupted world of Stormwind City was to marry a noble woman of noble status. But Duque did not have the time to play political games. Similarly, political promises were not reliable. Since that was the case, if he wanted to have the authority of a chess player in the shortest time possible, he had to find another way. Now, it was clear that Duque had succeeded. Once the news spread, Duque quickly gained a new nickname, Sea King Duque. Chapter 62. The sense of crisis in Duque's heart never disappeared. It was hard to describe what kind of situation Medivh was in. When Medivh's mind was in control, he was a kind and wise person. He did his best to protect the few highest human leaders, and he believed that the interests of the kingdom would always be above everything else. For so many years, he guarded the world of Azeroth, and defeated the fierce attacks of invaders time and again. The people saw him as the indestructible guardian of Azeroth. He treated all races equally, without the slightest bit of prejudice. When he heard the legends and customs of a certain race, no matter which race the speaker was from, he would sincerely respect them and show the same strong interest in these legends and cultures from different regions. However, once Sargeras gained the upper hand, Medivh's personality would change drastically. He would become gloomy and unsociable, almost unable to recognize his closest friends, and completely indifferent to strangers. He was secretive, and would often suddenly go on long journeys alone. When there was no one around, the Medivh controlled by Sargeras wouldn't hesitate to use spells to chase away the visitors who disturbed him, or just kill them. But for his plan, the Transcendent Guardian of Azeroth was a very important cover. So in public, he was careful enough not to easily expose Sargeras's true personality. Under Sargeras's influence, Medivh began to secretly study all kinds of evil magic and witchcraft, and built an identical underground tower under Karazhan as a place for him to carry out dark rituals. All of these were things that Duque had no way of knowing. He could only do it in his own domain. He himself was attacking the Sky Wizard. As for his 3 loyal subordinates, they were methodically preparing for war according to his instructions. Makarov almost became Duque's representative to the outside world. He was given a lot of authority to transfer gold coins, and the donations to the Stormwind Navy were almost all decided by Makarov alone. Windsor helped Duque train the sailors, and throwing javelins and operating ballistae became compulsory lessons for the sailors. On the water beside the main channel of Stormport, there were apprentice sailors sitting on small sampans all day long, practicing throwing javelins at target ships filled with straw. According to Duke standards, one had to be able to hit 80% on a human-shaped target at a distance of 30 meters in order to be hired as an official sailor of the whaling team. As for the ballistae, they had to hit the sampans of target ships from 100 meters away to be considered qualified. This was undoubtedly a demanding requirement for the fishermen's children who had never come into contact with this field. But the high salary attracted them to join Duke's whaling fleet, no matter how hard they tried. Sea King Duque had a good reputation. Duke ordered that the parts of the whale that did not taste good be marinated with ginger and other spices, and then sold to the commoners at a low price. That low price made most of the poor people who could only eat black bread able to afford whale meat. Whale meat, which wasn't too fishy, became one of the main sources of food for the poor in Storm City. Improving their meals was originally something that the poor could only dream of, but this in turn stimulated even more commoners to join Duke's whaling fleet. With the support of sufficient funds, Storm City, which never lacked labor, launched 3 major projects at the same time. The first was to build a huge stone dock. The dock was 30 meters wide, and the farthest end was 100 meters long. The overall shape was similar to a huge king character. There were 5 such docks, which could accommodate more than 60 medium-sized ships at the same time. The second was the expansion of Storm City's military port. In consideration of the invasion of foreign enemies, the military port was built as a safe haven, with 2 huge sluices at the outermost ring. The third was the shipyard. The huge shipyard could build 3 large ships of nearly 50 meters at the same time. Of the 3 projects, the dock was the fastest to be completed. Originally, dumping stones into the sea, driving piles, and fixing the foundation of the dock were extremely time-consuming and laborious. However, a miracle happened. Every evening, when the workers finished their work, the next morning, they would find that the piles had been firmly driven into the stone seabed at the bottom of the beach. There were even people who wandered around at night who reported to the city guards that there seemed to be large creatures appearing in the water at night in Storm Port. However, the guards did not receive a single report of casualties. Once, a drunkard lost his footing and fell into the sea in the middle of the night. As a result, he was sent to the beach when the tide was low. Well, it was the kind of creature that suddenly flew out of the sea, drew a parabola in the air, and then landed on the beach where there were people on the beach. The two old sailors looked like they had seen a ghost. Then, Windsor went to advise them, and even avoided reporting to the city guards. However, Lothar still summoned Xueqi once because of this. Storm City has never rejected friendly foreigners. Mr. Duke Marcus, are you sure you don't need to add some Naga names to your employee list? Sir, I don't think that's necessary for the time being. Xueqi replied humbly. Actually, I have a hunch that you want more than money and reputation. Lothar said calmly. What I want will not harm the interests of Storm City. On the contrary, we should be one. Time will prove everything. Xueqi still replied calmly. Lothar sighed. Well, it seems that you have a unique view on maritime affairs. You are much more proficient than a non-swimmer like me. The plan of the port that you submitted, all of my captains think that it is perfect. As for the design of the civil port, I will leave it to you. We are also willing to listen to your opinions on the military port. Just like that, as the designer of the new storm port, Xueqi was given more autonomy. First, Xueqi set a direction for the entire port, be it people or goods, to move clockwise. This would avoid chaos, and it would be the same if the time came. Between the military port and the civil port, Xueqi thoughtfully suggested to build a moat to separate the civil port for the sake of militarization and confidentiality. In addition, a large number of antlers and tall walls should be built. To the south of the military port was the civil port. All the warehouses were set between the military port and the civil port. Intentionally or unintentionally, Xueqi left a huge passage between the gates of Storm City and the port that could allow 100 people to walk side by side at the same time. Next to the warehouses was a 50-meter isolation belt, and then the city walls of Storm City. Inside the city walls was the newly built fish market. After all this was done, 3 months had passed. Suddenly, a new piece of news came. At the upcoming New Year's banquet, Medivh, who had suddenly returned, would attend. Chapter 63. Medivh is back? For most of the nobles and mages in Stormwind, it was not a rare thing. In fact, not many of them were overly worried. The powerful guardian of Azeroth would not be an issue of safety at all. And it was not the first time that he had disappeared without a word in recent years to travel alone. Hence, when Medivh returned, everyone's reaction was only, "Oh, he's back." Everyone's focus was on Xueqi. It was very simple. To everyone, Medivh was more like a mortal looking up at a glory that was above the clouds. It was something that could be seen but not reached. In the past year, all the commoners and even the nobles who were not doing well had idolized Xueqi, who had built everything from scratch. The youngest Earth Mage, a member of the Royal Mages, the king who ruled the Western Wilderness against the sea, the undisputed owner of the Pearl Sea Route, the inventor of Chanel perfume. There were so many halos on the same young man. It was rumored that King Lang had decided to grant Xueqi the title of a knight. For Xueqi, who was born as a commoner, it was definitely a meteoric rise. At least that was how the nobles saw it. In the past year, Xueqi had opened up the Pearl Sea Route and provided a large amount of additional taxes for Stormwind. Even though Lang had given Xueqi a great deal of preferential treatment, the tax of nearly 100,000 gold coins still made Lang's tax officer dizzy. Not only were the walls of Stormwind City being repaired, but even the storm fortress that had not been repaired for many years was also benefiting from it. The stonemasons of the Stonemason Guild were all grateful for Xueqi's greatness. Originally, Xueqi did not have the qualifications to attend the New Year's banquet, but Lang and Anduin jointly sent an invitation to Xueqi. Saturday, 8:00 p.m. Outside the storm fort, carriages slowly approached. The carriages were pulled by tall and strong horses. Just the backs of the horses were almost as tall as a person. Every horse's fur shone with a healthy luster, and almost every horse's fur was combed neatly. Some horses' manes were even arranged into braids. There were all kinds of carriages. Regardless of whether they were extravagant or low-key and exquisite, it was obvious that they had been renovated. Many of the carriages even smelled of freshly swept paint. Each carriage was engraved with their family's emblem. Each emblem represented their history and glory. Under the watchful eyes of the Storm City guards in brand new armor, the well-dressed noble gentlemen and ladies came down from their carriages and walked on the long red carpet. Some entered directly under the guidance of the emissaries, but most of them greeted each other at the entrance of the majestic Storm stronghold. The small circles were obviously abnormal. "Duke for Dragon, I didn't expect you to come so early." A middle-aged man bowed to a young man with reddish-brown hair and a black tuxedo. The other nobles around him were also very respectful towards this young noble. This was because he was the head of the Four-Dragon family, one of the largest families in Stormwind. He had inherited the title of Duke at a young age, Bolvar for Dragon. His mother, on the other hand, was a very famous noble lady in the upper echelons of the kingdom. Bolvar returned the noble's elegant bow. "Yes, Earl Carton. I heard that we can see the Sea King Duque today, so I came early." Earl Carton couldn't help but feel a little awkward. The Brando family was his vassal, but he quickly changed the topic and talked about something else. Unfortunately, all the big topics in Stormwind recently revolved around one person, Duke Marcus. "I heard that King Rin and Lothar agreed to let Duke Marcus come to the banquet in his own special carriage. I'd like to see what kind of carriage it is." No one knew which noble said this, but the result was that all the nobles couldn't help but look into the distance. Then, they finally saw an unfamiliar carriage. "Oh my God, what is that?" On the canal that traversed the entire inner city of Stormwind, something that was neither a ship nor a carriage floated over. It wasn't a ship because it didn't have a bow or a stern. It wasn't a carriage because it was moving on the river. If one had to say what it looked like, it was more like a palanquin. This was because it was supported by 4 huge male Nagas. On a normal day, such a strange carriage would have been attacked by Stormwind City's guards. But today, no one would attack them. This was because the carriage was also engraved with a coat of arms. It was imprinted with arcane magic, so it couldn't be counterfeited. The outer ring was a purple circle, and in the middle was a spiral lightning symbol that symbolized arcane magic. The rich arcane light showed that the owner of the carriage was sitting in the carriage. This was the coat of arms of the Royal Magic Academy's esteemed old wizard, Norton. Next to this coat of arms was a coat of arms that the nobles had never seen before. The pattern was very simple. It was a blue storm that looked like a tornado. It was carried by 4 majestic Nagas, and at the front sat a coachman wearing the standard Stormwind apprentice knight uniform. This strange carriage followed the canal and arrived in front of Stormwind stronghold. On the small dock of the stronghold, the Nagas swayed their huge snake tails and proudly carried the carriage to the long red carpet in the stronghold's reception hall. Stormwind City's guards stood on both sides without any special expression. It was obvious that they had been informed early in the morning. Some people recognized that the coachman was the slightly famous knight candidate, Reginald Windsor. The carriage was put down gently. Windsor jumped down nimbly and opened the door. Under the watchful eyes of the nobles, a black-haired young man in a blue-white mage robe with golden edges came down first. Then, he welcomed a tall middle-aged woman in an elegant cream-colored evening gown with an impeccable posture. She had long blonde hair that was tied up behind her head. Her facial features weren't exquisite, but it gave people a very pleasant and comfortable feeling. She was Elizabeth Jones, whom all the noble ladies in Stormwind City liked to interact with. The second to come down was the old wizard with the staff, Norton. However, the focus of the people's attention was still on Duque. Seeing the 4 majestic Nagas carry the carriage away and stand with Windsor in the line of coachmen, the group of nobles was surprised and a little amused. Then should the huge Naga be the coachman? Or the horse? Duke Bolvar's lips curled into a strange smile. What an interesting fellow. At this moment, a strong burst of arcane energy suddenly burst out in front of the red carpet. A magic circle with a diameter of 4 meters suddenly appeared. After a brief flash of arcane magic, a figure that everyone was both familiar and unfamiliar with appeared. Guardian of Azeroth, Medivh. Chapter 64. The reaction of the royal guards of Stormwind City was a benchmark after the blue-purple arcane light and the flowing light ribbons filled with runes floated away. As the royal guards who had witnessed Medivh's magnificent appearance countless times, they did not move at first, but in the next moment, at least 10 guards chose to hold their spears horizontally at high speed.
The steel spears in their hands that were more than 2 meters long were never just for decoration.
But halfway through their stances, they clearly showed signs of hesitation. Every guard recognized that it was indeed Medivh, but they all had doubts. Under that face that they had seen many times, was it really the same soul? In the past, no matter how strong Medivh was, he always had a modest, kind and comforting face. Some people even suspected that he was not a powerful mage, but an artist. Now,
his chin was slightly raised, his gaze as sharp as a knife, with a fierce arrogance. He swept his gaze around with the aura of a king.
Unlike the blue and white mage robe that symbolized the glory of court mages that he often attended formal occasions, today he wore a cloak made of soft black feathers, a very casual mage robe made of velvet. His hair was not properly combed, and it looked a bit like a chicken nest. Most importantly, there was not a single emblem of Stormwind on him. This was the most important New Year's banquet for the upper nobles of the kingdom. On this occasion where etiquette was the most important, as the closest comrade of King Lang, the highest existence in the field of magic in the kingdom, Medivh actually did not give face and did not even bring anything to show his status as a court mage of Stormwind. Not just the guards, but even the nobles were stunned. No matter how arrogant they were, they would not forget that the reason they could live such a comfortable life was inseparable from the protection of Medivh. In the north, Kuel Salis, Alterac and other areas all had the presence of troll clans. It should be said that most countries had the existence of organized foreign enemies. Only Stormwind was the most comfortable. This was largely because of the existence of Medivh. What the hell was Medivh doing now? For a moment, the atmosphere at the scene froze.
Medivh did not care about the gazes of the nobles and guards at all.
He, or rather Sargeras, looked with interest at Xueqi not far away. Hey, didn't expect to see you here. Xueqi kid. Xueqi's eyelids twitched. He saw the words in the system prompt. You have received deep attention from Medivh, who is completely controlled by Sargeras.
He bowed to Sargeras and said in a clear voice, I didn't expect to see you here either, respected guardian.
I heard that you were missing. During the time you were traveling alone, everyone was worried about you. Although it feels like you're a different person when we meet again, it doesn't matter. The Guardian's health is the guarantee of the kingdom and even the world of Azeroth.
Sargeras was amused by Duke's words, which were neither servile nor overbearing, but seemed to have a hidden meaning to them.
He cast his gaze on the Nagas beside Xueqi's carriage. Facing Sargeras's aggressive gaze, the four majestic Nagas trembled involuntarily, with deep fear in their eyes. They didn't know that this fear from their souls was because their ancestors, a group of elves with the High Elf Queen Azhara as the core, had been loyal to Sargeras. Sargeras didn't care about the Nagas, who were weak and incompetent in his eyes. He smiled and pointed at Xueqi. Only power is eternal. It's meaningless to rely on these beast-like monsters to fight for the so-called Sea King title. As for the Nagas, I can destroy them all with one finger. Xueqi's hard work in the past 6 months was belittled, but Xueqi wasn't angry. He said pointedly, there is nothing on this land that you can't destroy. As soon as this was said, even the nobles gasped. Xueqi really dared to say that. Was he accusing Medivh, the guardian of the world, of being the most terrifying existence? There were also a few nobles who were gloating. They had had enough of Xueqi's glory, and had enough of not being able to deal with Xueqi, who was under the triple protection of Lang, Lothar, and Medivh. This made them see the priceless pearl route, but they couldn't touch it. Now Xueqi actually had a conflict with Medivh? Good news. Great news. Unexpectedly, Medivh wasn't angry at all. He seemed to be in a good mood because of Xueqi's words. Ha ha ha. Kid, you'll know one day that only power is eternal. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. The arrogant laughter was like that of a night owl. It was hair-raising, and the atmosphere at the scene became much colder. At this time, the mighty and majestic Anduin Lothar arrived. He was wearing a blue and white knight's suit. He seemed to have seen Medivh's strange behavior. He still walked over. Out of his sensitivity to evil, he almost subconsciously held the scabbard with his left hand, and pressed his left thumb against the blade. This was a completely unconscious action, but it was noticed by many observant people. Medivh? Anduin said in a probing tone. Yo, my old friend. Medivh, who was controlled by Sargeras, had a slightly mocking expression on his face. Immediately after, he put on a warm expression and opened his arms. Because he was still wearing the black feather cloak, he looked like a goshawk pouncing on its prey.
Anduin resisted the strange and ominous intuition in his heart, and his body stiffly accepted the hug of Medivh.
Seeing this scene, Xueqi secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He knew that there probably wouldn't be anything major tonight. Demon King Sargeras had endless life, and it wasn't the first time he failed to invade Azeroth. Every failure made him extremely ashamed and angry. 10,000 years of hatred had long been imprinted in the soul of the Demon King. Even if he had already controlled the world's strongest mage, Medivh, and mastered that terrifying magic, Sargeras still felt that it wasn't enough. A simple massacre was no longer enough to fill the anger in his heart. He wanted to play with every existence in this world, make them fall under the conspiracy, and make them beg and worship him in pain and despair. So today, Sargeras would still be the last Medivh. Not caring about Xueqi anymore, Sargeras took the strange staff that Medivh was most famous for, a Tish Guardian's legendary staff, and walked affectionately with Noxus on the red carpet into the banquet hall. Looking at a Tish Guardian's legendary staff, Xueqi was in a trance, as if he had returned to the years in the game. The Atish in real life was just as ugly as he was now. The entire staff was dark orange, and the head of the staff was like a chicken leg. It was long and slender, and slightly taller than a human. The biggest feature was that every once in a while, there would be 3 translucent crows circling not too high above the head of the staff. Xueqi was a little embarrassed, but his heart was burning with eagerness. He didn't know if he would have the chance to obtain this one and only artifact like in the game in this life. Chapter 65. What was the point of defeating the boss? Fame. Equipment. A sense of achievement. Even though Xueqi had transmigrated and entered the world of Azeroth, it still could not extinguish his gamer's heart. A divine artifact was no longer just a powerful piece of equipment. It had been sublimated into a kind of spirituality. A seemingly arrogant idea surged uncontrollably into Xueqi's mind. Get rid of the Medivh possessed by Sargeras and snatch a Tish. Thinking of the wonderful feeling of the divine artifact magic staff, thinking of the world-shocking magical boost, Xueqi's heart could not calm down at all. Phew!
Xueqi exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Beside him, Elizabeth Jones and old wizard Norton, who had been invited along, had expressions of concern on their faces.
Are you all right?
They asked in unison. Xueqi knew that they were not asking about him, but his relationship with the Medivh.
I'll be fine. Xueqi's confident tone gave them confidence.
Completely ignoring the gloating looks of some of the nobles, Xueqi strode into the banquet hall with Norton and Jones under the guidance of a waiter. After today, there would most likely be various interpretations of this in the nobles' circle. Xueqi had no interest in those political games. Towards this group of unlucky fellows, Xueqi almost ignored them. He only silently let the system elf record their various information. The luxurious banquet hall was slightly larger than a football field. Not only was it resplendent, but the tall ceiling was full of magnificent murals. Humans used such an artistic form to record civilization and history. On the huge dome murals, Xueqi saw the 7 kingdoms of the humans, the High Elves' Kuel Salas, the Dwarves' Iron Furnace Fort, and Thoradin the Great defeating the Troll Empire. Xueqi was so fascinated by the murals that it made Lady Jones beside him anxious. Yo, my Sea King. The New Year's banquet is a very important gathering of the nobles. Although I know that you have a high status as a mage, having a good relationship with the nobles is beneficial to the expansion of our business. I'm begging you, for the sake of your Magus Tower, at least come with me to visit a few of the most important nobles. It was already an open secret that Xueqi was earning money to build the Magus Tower. It was precisely because of this perfect excuse that the neutral nobles no longer held a grudge against Xueqi. With Jones, who was very popular among the noble ladies, the perfume was selling like hotcakes. However, Xueqi shook his head at Jones and said, "Something big is going to happen tonight. I suggest you put away your thoughts of promoting your business first." Jones' body suddenly stiffened. Even after so many months of happy cooperation, she still couldn't figure out what this young man was thinking. His mind was detached from the world, and his eyes always seemed to fall on a place beyond the imagination of the world. Lady Jones didn't dare to disobey Xueqi. After all, Xueqi was almost her boss, and 90% of her business was related to Xueqi. At this time, the messenger announced, "King Lang and his wife have arrived. Lang, who was wearing a dazzling golden robe, held the hand of the beautiful queen and his children, and walked into the hall with the guards opening the way. On the high platform that had long been prepared, the bright light of the huge candlesticks allowed everyone to clearly see the details of every gold ornament on King Lang. Lang was full of smiles. The situation of the kingdom had improved, and the return of his friend Mediv had put him in a good mood.
Everyone could feel the king's success. Guests, all the people of the kingdom, welcome here. I, Lang Rin, am pleased to host the New Year's banquet here.
In the past year, the whole kingdom has been prosperous, and the people have lived a better life than before.
Here, I would like to make a grand introduction to everyone and thank a young man.
He is our new member of the royal family's mages, the new Earth Mage, the owner of the Pearl Line, the sponsor of the new port of Stormwind, and the sponsor of the Stormwind Navy ships, Duke Marcus.
Mr. Marcus, please come on stage. Lang opened his palm and pointed at Duque. Duque was also a little stunned. He didn't expect that Lang would introduce him to the entire noble class so grandly. This was definitely the king's favor. Suddenly becoming the focus of everyone's attention, Duque was also a little flattered. His slightly opened mouth showed his nervousness. Don't be nervous, young man. You deserve it. The handsome Anduin Lothar came near Duque and patted Duque on the shoulder, encouraging him to go on stage.
After Duque came back to his senses, the sly Anduin whispered, I publicly support you because of the city wall.
Duque didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Lothar, can you not be so snobbish? Are you thinking about how to suck blood from me next year? Under the watchful eyes of everyone, Duque went on stage. King Lang smiled at Duque and patted Duque's shoulder affectionately.
He then slowly pulled out his golden sword that looked like an eagle spreading its wings.
Please kneel, young man. Kneel? Kneel for what? Duque couldn't react at all. Lothar, who was next to Duque, was still alert.
He whispered, His Majesty wants to confer a title on you.
If you want to refuse, you can choose not to kneel. Is this considered a surprise attack? I've already transmigrated to this world and can't go back. I can either integrate into this world or be rejected by this world. There is no third option. Alright. It's a title, after all. I'll just kneel then. After a brief daze, Duque still decided to kneel on one knee. King Lang was very satisfied. His half-squinted eyes were full of smiles.
He brandished his gorgeous sword and tapped on Duque's left and right shoulders with the sides of the sword. Duke Marcus, I don't care where you come from, but since you are willing to serve Stormwind and offer your courage and wisdom for the benefit of the people of the kingdom, for the sake of the smiling faces of the people, I confer you the title of Knight. I hope that you will continue to serve faithfully from now on and create more wealth and happiness for the kingdom and the people.
Lang's words made Duque feel very comfortable. I, Duke Marcus, am willing to serve the people of Stormwind. No one noticed that Duque cleverly followed Lang's words and avoided the words kingdom and king. He only said to serve the people. Lang was very happy. Sir Marcus, I didn't mean to squeeze you. But the life of the people of the kingdom is still difficult. I hope you can perform better next year. I will. Duque stood up. He could really feel the envy, jealousy, and hatred coming from all directions. Conferring a title as a commoner, it was often only by making great military contributions that one would be promoted from the knight class. But Duque had completely bypassed the knight class and directly entered the realm of the true aristocracy. This was inseparable from his covert expansion of territory in Stormwind. Chapter 66. There was no doubt that Duque was the focus of the banquet. Even though Mediva's disciple, Khadgar, had officially become an Earth Mage, he did not change the topic. This was because Duque had become an Earth Mage at the age of 14, and now he was faintly touching the bottleneck of becoming a Sky Mage. No matter how hard Khadgar worked, and even though he had more knowledge than Duque, he had only become an Earth Mage at the age of 15. If it wasn't for Duque, he would have been the focus of the entire kingdom's upper echelons. Unfortunately, there was Duque. No matter how talented a genius was, in front of Duque, they would be overshadowed. Out of respect for Mediv, the nobles congratulated him verbally, but Khadgar could clearly hear the nobles' whispered comments. What? Compared to a true genius, Khadgar is only at this level. Lower your voice. After all, Duque is comparable to Mediva's 9th grade aptitude. Didn't you see that Mediv also said that he wanted to take Duque as his disciple? Khadgar should be happy. If Duque had become Mediva's disciple, would he still have the resources he has now? In the end, Khadgar was still a 15-year-old child. Even if he had a complicated past, he could not be as mature and steady as an adult. His forced smile could not hide his disappointment. He suddenly longed for Mediva's comfort. Only Mediv, the strongest mage in the world, the wisest and most forgiving senior, could give him comfort. He turned his head, as if he had been struck by lightning. What did he see? A cold master. If it was a dignified one, then so be it. But Mediv, who he had not seen for months, had a ridiculing expression on his face as if it had nothing to do with him. What happened to Master? Khadgar was stunned. Before the banquet officially entered the ball stage, there was still one more segment, and that was for the nobles or invited guests to present gifts to the king. Generally speaking, King Lang knew how to conduct himself. After all, this was a segment where the poor begged for tips, while the rich begged to show off. Presents were not just simple gifts. For example, if a poor fellow presented a poem of praise to the queen or the little prince or the little princess, they could also receive a reward from the king. Dumbfounded, Duque watched as a minor noble said to the king, "The beautiful queen is like the stars in the sky, blinking like a frog blinking." He didn't know if there was a problem with the system elf's translation, or if it was a lousy poem. Anyway, Lang used a few gold coins to send this guy away amidst the laughter of the nobles. It should be the latter. It seemed that there were still different grades for performing. Duque also presented his gift. The ceremonial officer had seen Duque's gift before the banquet and decisively announced that Duque's gift would be the finale. Unfortunately, the Mediv also said that he wanted to present a gift, so Duque's gift was ranked second to last. The ceremonial officer first presented a gold-inlaid camphor wood box and a tray covered with red velvet to Lang. The strong camphor aroma of the camphor wood, with a cool and slightly spicy taste, had already shocked the spirits of Lang and the queen. "This is?" Lang asked with a smile. Duque spread his hand and motioned for the ceremonial officer to open it, and the nobles suddenly let out a whisper of envy. It was a snow-white pearl frost. It had whitening, acne and freckle effects. This was a new gadget that had just become popular in the past week, and all the noble ladies who had used it said it was good. Under the manipulation of the pair of profiteers, Duque and Jones, this new gadget, a small round box the size of the palm of the hand, sold for almost 20 gold coins. Now, Duque had given several kilograms to the queen. The queen could clearly hear the exclamations of the noble ladies. The queen's eyes had already turned into crescent moons from smiling. "Oh, Sir Marcus has spent a lot." For the queen's beauty, everything is worth it. Duque gave a deep bow. It was really a lot of money. He didn't even know if he had spent a few of Duke's copper coins. Perhaps it was because he had lost his moral integrity and had not replied, but Duque also felt that he had become a profiteer. Pearl frost was said to be made from the most precious pearl powder. But would Duque, who had been misled by profiteers, use so much pearl powder when he went to see X Island before transmigrating? Don't even think about it. The composition of the pearl powder was the same as the composition of the layer of pearl membrane on the clam shell. The so-called pearl powder was scraped off the clam shell. In CX Island, those who knew their stuff would not buy pearl powder, because the pearl powder on the market could be bought for 15 gold coins from the fishermen who raised artificial pearls. In the eyes of the Storm King, Queen, and the nobles, that box of pearl frost was priceless. The most expensive thing was actually that box. Of course, Duque would not divulge this secret. As for what was offered to the king, it was a goose egg-sized spherical pearl with a flawless, warm, and exquisite color. Under the bright candlelight, it exuded a soft halo. It was precisely this natural gentle beauty, as well as this elusive mysterious charm and elegant temperament, that reminded people of the extreme gentleness of a woman. Seeing this big pearl, every aristocrat revealed a look of yearning and envy. Such a beautiful pearl, even if it was presented to the kings of the 7 kingdoms, it would still give them a lot of face. Lang was also stunned, his face full of excitement. This fellow Duque was really thoughtful. Such a gorgeous pearl was enough to be inlaid on the crown. "Dear subject, you have spent a lot of money. I just happened to pick it up. Only you, your majesty, are worthy of such a gorgeous pearl." Duque bowed deeply and let his face the floor.
It was not that Xueqi was so polite, but rather that he was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and laugh. Before transmigrating, who didn't know that the bigger and more beautiful a pearl was, the more fake it was. Pearls were formed when a mussel opened its shell to absorb sand and other foreign substances. The foreign substances stimulated the mussel shell to secrete nacreous substance. Wasn't it easy to make a pearl round? Just get a larger glass bead inside, and the rest of the mussel shell would be done by itself. Now, Xueqi had a few giant mussels that were more than 2 meters long in the western wilderness. Xueqi had already asked Vara to make a hole in the shell to lock the mussels. As long as Xueqi wanted, Xueqi could even make a pearl the size of a human head. Speaking of which, Xueqi was so good at conducting himself purely because Xueqi wanted to make things difficult for Medivh, who was controlled by Sargeras. Xueqi had already vaguely guessed what Medivh was going to offer next. He wanted to hold up the hearts of Lang and Anduin first, and when Medivh threw their hearts down, they would be more deeply and in more pain. After receiving the king's praise, and after Lang promised to give more convenience to Xueqi, Xueqi retreated. The focus of the audience fell on Medivh, who had been looking at the audience with a faint smile and an unfriendly gaze.
Chapter 67. Lang, who was in a good mood, slapped his thigh on the throne and smiled. All right, Medivh, my old friend, the guardian of Azeroth. Logically, there shouldn't be any formalities between us. But since you said you wanted to present a gift, then come. I also want to see what you've specially found. There was a cruel smile on Medivh's face, which gave Lang a bad feeling. Not to mention Lang, even Anduin could not help but take a step forward. As childhood friends who had been friends for decades, they should not have such a reaction. But the ominous aura that was so bad that it was almost leaking out made them instinctively reject Medivh's approach. Medivh did not make a move.
He opened his hand and suddenly conjured a large hourglass that was as long as his forearm and placed it in the hands of the ceremonial officer.
It was a strange transparent hourglass. Inside the light brown birch shell was a glass hourglass. But the sand in the hourglass was shockingly black. Black sand that exuded an ominous and destructive aura. Sha sha sha. The sand kept pouring down, but the sand at the top of the hourglass slowed down very slowly. Rather than saying it was an hourglass, it was more like a strange magical device that was counting down. Seeing this iconic hourglass, Xueqi only felt his heart beating violently. This heartbeat was so violent that it felt like it was about to jump out of his chest. At the same time, his black pupils shrank to the smallest as he stared at the hourglass. Hey! Medivh, from the first time I saw you today, I felt that something was wrong with you. What the hell are you doing? Anduin Lothar walked forward.
Unknowingly, he had quietly put on a suit of armor. Although it was also a ceremonial armor, it was still armor. One had to know that he was only wearing a knight's attire before the opening. Now, the future Azeroth lion, Anduin Lothar, was vaguely blocking the path between Medivh and Lang. He held the scabbard in his left hand and was in the posture of drawing his sword at any time.
Old friend, if it's a cold joke, isn't it a little too bad? Tonight is the New Year's banquet.
Lang spread his hands, as if trying to smooth things over.
The Medivh didn't appreciate it at all. His face was full of mockery and ridicule.
You will know what this is in the future. With a gentle poke of his slender and thin fingers, the black hourglass was overturned in front of the ceremonial official who was holding the plate with both hands, as well as the gazes of Xueqi, the king's family, Anduin, and the other nobles.
Clatter! The enormous hourglass fell to the ground and turned upside down. Logically speaking, the sand in the hourglass should flow in the opposite direction under the influence of gravity. But no. Defying gravity, the sand flowed from the bottom to the top, still maintaining the same rhythm, grain by grain, handful by handful. Everyone's eyes suddenly froze, and everyone's heart almost forgot to beat. Fear, uneasiness, and deep confusion gripped everyone's heart. The strong negative emotions almost made Lang's chest explode. He pressed his left hand on the pauldron on Anduin's right shoulder, as if he wanted to push Anduin away and ask Medivh face to face. However, Lothar's bulging muscles told Lang that the leader of the Royal Knights had already entered a combat-ready state. King Lang couldn't help but stiffen. Without doing anything to Lang, Medivh's face was filled with endless arrogance and a touch of evil.
Without saying another word, Medivh snapped his fingers with his left hand amidst a burst of owl-like laughter.
In an instant, his entire body disappeared.
He turned into countless black crows that flew all over the sky, making unpleasant cawing sounds, and swaggered away under the shocked gazes of hundreds of nobles.
Countless black crow feathers floated in the air. They spread an ominous and gloomy aura to everyone present. Banquet? Can the banquet still go on?
Even if the chief protocol officer was extremely tactful and let the band play with cheerful music to slightly dilute the ominous aura. Unfortunately, no one would be in a good mood when they saw the black crow feathers on the ground and the hourglass that could actually flow sand in reverse.
King Lang couldn't even hide his anger and confusion. He tried to continue with the banquet, but the attempt only lasted for 15 seconds. Lang nodded to the people below and left with his family.
Following closely behind Lang's footsteps was the loyal Anduin Lothar, as well as dozens of fully armed royal knights who had arrived at the periphery of the venue.
They were like a moving fortress, surrounding the king as he left. The banquet was not a good one. The nobles were also in a bad mood and dispersed one after another.
"Let's go," Xueqi said to Madame Jones and old Mage Norton, and was about to leave.
Suddenly, 3 figures deliberately blocked in front of Xueqi and the others. Xueqi was stunned. He suddenly realized that he didn't know the person who was leading the group. The high-ranking noble with brown parting hair nodded at Xueqi.
"Hello, I am Duke Bolvar for Dragon."
Upon hearing this name, Xueqi's heart trembled. Bolvar was not just any Tom, Dick, or Harry.
In the original history of Azeroth, Bolvar would first become the regent of Stormwind, responsible for taking care of the young king Varian Rin. Later on, Bolvar was ambushed while fighting against the Scourge Legion, and the expeditionary army he led was wiped out. He was lucky enough to survive with an inhuman body. The Lich King tried to turn him into a Death Knight, but he thought that his great will resisted the Lich King. Later on, after the Lich King's death, in order to suppress the Scourge Legion, he took the initiative to use his own body as a seal and became the next Lich King. It could be said that Bolvar for Dragon was the model of a holy knight, a model of human virtue. Towards such an existence, even if he was not as great as he would be in the future, Xueqi couldn't help but feel deep veneration.
"Hello, I am..." Xueqi's sudden change in reaction was strange, but Bolvar didn't pay much attention to it, because he had more important things to do. "Sir Marcus, may I come a little closer?" Xueqi was puzzled, but still nodded.
Bolvar moved closer and said in a low voice, "I'm sorry to interrupt your journey, but Sir Anduin Lothar specifically asked you to come with me to the inner palace to discuss the matter with His Majesty."
Xueqi was a little embarrassed. Am I being targeted by Lothar and King Rin?
Xueqi turned his head and looked at Old Man Norton. The old man was tactful. "Then I will send Madame Jones back first.
Windsor and your coachman will be waiting for you there." "My apologies. Wizard Norton is also on His Majesty's list of enlistments," Bolvar added.
Madame Jones tactfully gave a ladylike bow. "Then I will let the guards send me back."
You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.